Good morning, everyone, and good evening for those folks who are joining from India. My name is Dr. Sridhar Reddy Korsapati. I'm currently serving as a NATA president. I live in Dallas, and NATA started like 12 years back with the motto of Samskrutika, Vikasame Nata Mata, Samaja Sevaye Nata Bata ane oka concept toti 12 years back. Our emeritus chair, Dr. Prem Reddy గారి ఆధ్వర్యంలో ఈ సంస్థ స్థాపించబడింది. దానికి మేము ఈ సంవత్సరం కరెంట్గా నేను ప్రెసిడెంట్గా ఉన్నాను. ఈరోజు మే 15th ఇక్కడ ఈ వెబ్ సెమినార్లో పాల్గొంటున్నటువంటి ఇలాంటి స్టార్ వార్డ్స్ డాక్టర్లందరూ కూడా మరొకసారి నాటా తరపున నేను నమస్కారాలు, ధన్యవాదాలు. ఈ కార్యక్రమానికి ముఖ్యంగా ఆప్నా ఫౌండేషన్ సౌజన్యంతో ఆపి వారి సహకారంతో మనం వివిధ డాక్టర్లని వారి యొక్క విశిష్ట సేవలు, వారి విశిష్ట అంటే వాళ్ళ ప్రొఫెషన్స్ లో ఉన్నటువంటి వివిధ రంగాల్లో వాళ్ళు ఉన్నటువంటి డాక్టర్లు వారి సేవల్ని మాకు అందిస్తున్నందుకు మరొకసారి నాటా తరపున మేము ధన్యవాదాలు తెలుపుతున్నాము. అలాగే పోస్ట్ కోవిడ్ తర్వాత కమ్యూనిటీలో పర్టికులర్ గా ఈ ప్రవాస ఆంధ్రులు, ప్రవాస ఇండియన్స్, దే ఆర్ ఆల్ గోయింగ్ త్రూ లాట్ ఆఫ్ ఎమోషన్స్ అండ్ ఆల్సో పోస్ట్ కోవిడ్ syndromes. We have seen that. With your help, with your lectures, with your presentations, hope some of those concerns can be heard and resolved and beneficial to our Telugu community. ఈ రోజు ఈ కార్యక్రమానికి ఇచ్చేసిన మా డాక్టర్స్ అందరూ కూడా నేను ధన్యవాదాలు తెలుపుతున్నాను. అందులో డాక్టర్ భావానంద రెడ్డి గారు, డాక్టర్ సంగీత రెడ్డి గారు, even she has been off the way middle of between India and US and participating in this seminar. Thank you very much, ma'am. And Dr. Sanjeev Reddy, particularly Dr. Adishesha Reddy, who actually initiated this effort. Dr. Adishesha Reddy is Apna Foundation and also working with the API. Dr. Ravi Kolli, Dr. Upama, Dr. Mohan Mallam, Dr. Vinas, Dr. Kishore, Dr. Jagannath, Dr. Padma Jagaru, Dr. Swarna, Dr. Prasad Garimella, సత్య శ్రీరామ్ గారు, అలాగే ఈ యొక్క వెబ్ సెమినార్ డాక్టర్ ప్రవీణ్ గారు, ప్లస్ అలాగే ఈ యొక్క వెబ్ సెమినార్ ని టెక్నికల్ గా కానీ మాకు బిహైండ్ ఉండి మా నాటా ఈ వెబ్ సెమినార్ ని సహకరించిన నా సహచర సోదరులు, మిత్రులు మరియు మా కమిటీ మెంబర్స్ అయినటువంటి డాక్టర్ ఆళ్ళ రామిరెడ్డి గారు, డాక్టర్ సుబ్బారెడ్డి గారు మరియు నారాయణ రెడ్డి is our treasurer. And thank you very much. Now I am giving over to the Dr. Adishesha Reddy. Thank you very much.
You are on mute, Andy, Dr. Adishesha Reddy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I can't match Sridhar's eloquence in Telugu, but I'll speak in English. I'm very, very excited to welcome all.
He's on mute.
I don't know what's happening.
Unmute. Okay, now you're okay.
You're good.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're good.
Yeah, okay. I hope it is good for a while. I'm very excited to welcome you all to this webinar with this distinguished top-class speakers. In his recent motivational speaker, in his recent book, motivational speaker Tony Robbins says that you should be the CEO of your own health. It doesn't matter what your profession is, whether you're a doctor or a professor or a computer expert or rocket scientist. You should be proactive with your own health. And we hope this webinar helps you to shape your personal healthcare strategy. So that's what our motive, and hopefully we'll accomplish that at least to some extent. And this weekend has been hectic for me, with my daughter graduating from UAB School of Medicine yesterday, and could not devote as much time as I wanted to. But I'm quite happy with this wonderful cast of doctors supporting me in this endeavor, and also the computer professionals, Dr. Sri Allah Ramreddy Garu and Sri Subbareddy Garu Meka Garu and Sri Gandra Narayan Reddy Garu and Sri Korsapati Garu to support in this effort. And I'm sure this will go smoothly. Without non-doctors, this program would not have been a success. So I really appreciate them. So without any further delay, let me introduce our. I have a dual role. One, I'm a chairman of Advisory Council of NATA, and also I'm involved with APNA Foundation. So with that, so APNA and NATA jointly did this endeavor with the blessing of API. So I'm going to introduce past president and chairman of Advisory Council of NATA, Dr. Mohan Mallam, to introduce the first speakers, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy and Dr. Satya Sriram. Mohan, please take over.
Okay. Yes, Sharidi. Good morning, good evening, everybody. Thanks to all the speakers. Instead of spending your time with your family on a Sunday, you are doing some community service. Now that is really a applaudable event. And we, before I introduce them, first of all, let me thank Dr. Ashish Reddy Garu for thinking about this topic, timely topic. Now we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and Dr. Ashish Reddy came up with this topic, and he gathered the speakers and coordinated. He spent a lot of time on this. And also the technical brains behind this today's event, Ram Reddy, Narayan Reddy, and Subba Reddy, and others, really, on behalf of the NATA, as a former chair of the Advisory Council and current member of the Advisory Council of NATA, I thank all of them for their time. And we have a beautiful schedule today. And the first speaker is Dr. Sangeeta Reddy Garu. Actually, Dr. Sangeeta Reddy Garu does not need any introduction. Everybody knows her. Now, she is the CEO of the Apollo Hospitals. And in spite of her busy schedule, she was able to join us for a few minutes. And after that, I think Dr. Satya Sriram Garu is going to give the actual presentation. And I'll let Dr. Sangeeta Reddy Garu say a few words, and then I will get on to Dr. Satya Sriram. Sangeeta Reddy Garu, you want to say a few words?
Okay. Namaste, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's a pleasure to connect with all of you. The Indian community across the world is doing so much to elevate the overall status of India, and you serve in whichever area or whichever community you belong. So let me begin by congratulating you, and especially congratulating the North American Telugu Association. Dr. Prem Singh Reddy is also very well known to our family, and it's a pleasure to see all of you. So many friends, Dr. Adishesha Reddy, Dr. Mohan Mallam, many of you, Dr. Anupama, Dr. Prasad, Andaru Chala Baga Telshina Vallu, Andarki Namaskaralu. Meeru ee program చేస్తున్నందుకు మాకు చాలా సంతోషంగా ఉంది, because Dr. Reddy, my father, continues to say that it is most important for us to focus on staying healthy and preventive health. So at Apollo, we're trying to commit that as much as we do in curing high-end care, cardiac bypass and transplants, etc., we put an equal emphasis or focus on preventive healthcare and keeping people healthy. And this is a holistic view of health, including, Ayurveda and yoga, and a very holistic view. So Dr. Satya will be speaking more about this. But I just want to say one last line, and that is that the stress that the world has undergone in the last 2 years because of COVID has been unprecedented. But there is hope, because even in that difficult time, we found cures, we came out of it, we figured out how to create new protocols, we collaborated globally, we used technology, and we have found that the human race or mankind is actually capable of overcoming many obstacles. The big obstacle in front of us now is not really the underlying pandemic of COVID, but really the endemic situation of non-communicable disease, of which cardiac, stroke, and stress is one of the big factors. And its manifestations, from sleep apnea to all kinds of personality tensions, are being manifested because of the quality of life and the tensions of everyday life. So our ability to really, like was beautifully said, be CEOs of our own health, find ways to manage our health, including the stress and the entire environment, I think is really the key to future happiness. I also recently attended Peter Diamandis of Singularity University of Abundance 360. And his hypothesis is really that all of us have the potential to really live beyond 100 or 120 because of the advances that science is making today. But it's in our hands to live those years healthy and happy. And so with this, I'm going to wish all of you a healthy life. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Satya Sriram, who is the CEO of our Preventive Health Division. My congratulations and best wishes to all of you. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Satya, over to you.
Okay, yeah. Before she starts speaking, Sangeeta, I would like to introduce Dr. Satya Sriram, who is the Chief Executive Officer of at the Apollo Hospitals. And as a part of her role, she's promoting the Apollo Pro Health by different means. And she was with the McKinsey & Company, a management consulting company, for 10 years, where she worked extensively with the hospitals, health insurances, and pharmaceutical industries, as well as the public and social sector in India, Southeast Asia, and the USA. In her most recent role, she was the Director of the Strategic Initiatives, helping chart out their 5-year strategy, setting up new consulting delivery models and people initiatives for McKinsey in India. She was also instrumental in setting up a research-based do tank, McKinsey Center for Government in Singapore, that specializes in understanding and disseminating best practices followed by governments globally. In addition, from year 2015 to 2019, she led the strategy and marketing for the Hindu group based in Chennai. During her tenure with the group, she built new revenue streams in digital content subscription, as well as a consumer insights and marketing solutions advisory business. Satya has a PhD in neuroscience from Johns Hopkins University, and she brings her understanding of the brain to developing insights about the way consumers behave and respond. She also highlights the underlying neurophysiology of leadership behaviors and mindsets to coach students and women at the workplace. So here is Dr. Satya Sriram. It is your turn, Dr. Satya.
Namaste. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction.
Satya Garu, can I just do, as a moderator, I need to be, is it 20 minutes possible? 20 minutes, okay. Oh,
absolutely possible, absolutely.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And it's a delight to be here. COVID was actually a very, very difficult and tough time for all of us across the world. But the one big takeaway for everyone collectively is that we absolutely must proactively think about our health. The life expectancy in the turn of the last century, 1900, was 32 years old. But now it is 71. And as Dr. Sangeeta mentioned, it is going to hit 100 and further in our own lifetime. We will all live longer as a society, but the opportunity is in how we are going to live our lives. The quality of our life in the future will depend on what we do today. And the critical first step for all of this is to ensure that we actually take a much more modern definition of health. Health is not just the presence or absence of disease. It is essentially how we feel, how we function, how we relate to one another, how we work, and how we actually live our lives. At Apollo, one of the things that we actually think about is 6 pillars of preventive health. Very much the first one is what we put inside our bodies, not just what items, but in what proportion. Having a balanced diet, controlling our portions to ensure that the right amount of the right fruits and vegetables, carbs and proteins, including water and cutting out the sugar, is a critical first pillar. Physical activity, exercise, at least 150 minutes a week, ideally, making sure that we are not sitting, especially in front of our screens and at our desks all the time, having much more movement. And thirdly, flexibility and muscle strength. Our musculoskeletal health is directly correlated with the quality of our life as well as the longevity. And I don't think as a group we pay enough attention to that aspect. So thinking about our muscle strength and flexibility is another important angle. Sleep cycle, we're all aware, 6 to 8 hours, but also impacts our body metabolism as well as our mind health. And so it is interconnected in an important dimension of what we need to think about and take cognizance of. Our mind health, as in this day and age, we have actually, we're exposed to about 32 GB of information every single day. That's how much our brain needs to actually process and file away and organize the most important aspects and discard what we don't think is important. We need to give the brain the space, the time to declutter, to be able to actually be positive and be able to embrace what we need to do. Another dimension is social connectedness. What we're doing here today, what we do with our families and friends and at our workplace, how connected we are rather than be as individuals is a very, very important of our holistic health. And finally, when we do need to take medicines, it is critical to adhere to it. There is studies that show that people tend to start medications, but sometimes as soon as 3 weeks, the adherence to actually taking medications at the right time goes away. Collectively, all of this is essentially what we think about as holistic health, and important for us to think about our own, but also our near and dear ones. We all own vehicles, some more expensive ones than others. Each vehicle has on average about 30,000 parts, and we are exceptionally diligent about servicing our vehicles annually. But we don't think about our body as well, right? Our body is often left unserviced for many years at a time. And while we are very well aware of this fact, it is really hard and often deprioritized for us to actually proactively think about where our current health is and what we need to do about it. Why are we not taking it as seriously? At least our hypothesis is, as a sandwich generation between taking care of our children, the next generation, and being responsible, dutiful children to our parents, as well as the community at large, and in that process also pursuing professional pursuits, we often forget and deprioritize our own health. But we don't deprioritize our retirement fund. We don't deprioritize our children's education fund, but we do tend to deprioritize our health. After thinking about what, therefore, why we do that, and what we need to do to change our own behaviors, we actually arrived on 3 important areas that we need to focus on as a Bono to really push preventive health and make it realistic for people to adapt their lifestyles. The first is making the health itself tangible. Often it goes unnoticed until there is a pain or a symptom that is something tangible. Then we actually do make the time to go see a doctor or to go get the diagnostic tests we need. But can we make that underlying health even more tangible even earlier? The second is Indian population risks. Genetically, we are different from Caucasian populations. This is well proven. There are many studies. How are we ensuring that the risk scores that we have, that the interventions that we do are tailored to Indian population risks itself, especially as we think about cardiac risks that is increasingly targeting people that is much younger, between 30 and 50-year-olds, and far younger than Caucasian populations. And how do we then ensure that once we understand these things, we help people make behavioral changes to their habits itself and shift to healthier lifestyles that are sustainable? So one of the first things, in order to make the health tangible, we are actually using mixed reality to find a way to help you understand what is going on in your heart itself. In a partnership with Microsoft, along with a artificial intelligence enabled cardiac risk score, we take your vitals and get a few questions answered, and then make your health come alive in a mixed reality world when you wear a Microsoft Hololens. Show what your modifiable risk contributors are for the most common non-communicable conditions, the blood pressure, diabetes, and so forth, and show you what is going on inside your arteries, what could go wrong if you do not take cognizance of this and do not act. And on the flip side, what could actually happen if you do shift your lifestyles to healthier diets and active physical exercise and so forth. The other thing we've done is actually transform the more traditional health check. We wanted to go beyond a set of diagnostic blood tests and imaging tests to truly take a more holistic evaluation of your current health status, including mind health, including sleep, as well as the musculoskeletal health. The first step to that is actually understanding your own risks. So we have devised a health risk assessment that takes into account your medical and family history, also the lifestyle choices that you have made. Using a prescriptive algorithm, recommend based on your risk, what personalized tests you need to be doing on a regular basis. The second step from that is actually the diagnostic evaluation itself, multi-organs, including the mind, including musculoskeletal, and then to be able to have a conversation with the doctor to understand what areas you need to focus on and how one can actually get healthier. We call this the path to wellness. Before we do that, we actually have developed several risk scores that are on Indian population risks. Thanks to the privilege of having data of individuals across their lifespan, we've been able to develop cardiac risk scores that predict the risk of a cardiac event within 7 to 10 years, your risk of having pre-diabetes within 3 years, as well as your risk of acute exacerbation of asthma that is connected with the air pollution index of the city that you are living in, and be able to predict these future health events for you and combine that as part of your evaluation. And finally, based on the doctor recommendations, your current risks as well as your current health status, we develop a path to wellness and ensure that one stays on this track through a series of messages, an app, as well as calls with health mentors to enable a nudge-based care continuum. We've seen over the last year, with over 100,000 people going through this program, actual clinical outcomes in reduction in diabetes through an HbA1c marker, reduction in weight, as well as significant management and control of blood pressure. This is at the individual level. We also think that many of these are actually relevant at the population health level. And I'd like to briefly share the example of Total Health. This is a set of villages in the Chittoor area where Apollo has actually invested a holistic community development program and included health and non-communicable disease management as a very core part of that program itself. And we've been able to follow people over a 4 to 5 year period, those who are diagnosed with diabetes, hypertension, and cancer. And we see that over this time period, we are able to proactively manage their conditions and control their blood sugars as well as their BP. I'm going to leave you finally with a message from our chairman, Dr. Pratap Reddy. Our life is priceless. I think COVID has taught us this tough life lesson, and it is therefore imperative for every one of us to truly prioritize this above everything else, above our professional pursuits, above our monetary pursuits, and to truly protect it with everything that we have. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Wonderful, Satya. So, Garu, so Satya Sriram Garu. Yeah. So we have some questions open for 5 minutes questions. So anybody has any questions for Dr. Sriram? So I'll just ask something. So it seems like the population, both in India and US, Indian community, we have the same genetic risk factors. So I think whatever you mentioned, that can be extrapolated here also in US.
Absolutely. And I think that is very much the intent. A number of the work that is done typically tends to be around Western and Caucasian populations. And given that our underlying genetic makeup and physiology is slightly different, I think we owe it to the Indian community globally as well as in India to take what we are learning here and take it to the diaspora across the world.
Great.
I have a question. What is the approximate cost of joining and for 1 or 2 years following the program per individual?
Yes. So we have programs that are starting from roughly about 6,000 to 7,000 rupees. So that would be roughly $90 to $100 perhaps, all the way to programs that is around 20 or 25,000 rupees, which is $300. So we have that scale. It comes down to sort of the set of diagnostic tests that you'd like to do. For example, on the higher end, we do include CT and MRIs as well, depending on whether you have that risk. And on the lower end, we have covered pretty much all of the blood tests and the imaging tests, along with the physiotherapy as well as the mind health.
Yeah, hi. May I ask a question? Satya, it's a nice topic you talked about. I'm a psychiatrist, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Effects of stress and as well as adherence to treatment. And diabetes and depression are going in tandem, and compliance and adherence is very poor. If you have mental health issues as well, same thing with cardiac outcomes as well. When depression is coexisting with cardiac problems, the mortality is pretty high. So I think in our fractured system of care, we're not integrating the mental health as well as the physical health. I think until we address that elephant in the living room, we're not going to control the cost and improve our outcome.
I couldn't agree more, right? And I think that is our biggest challenge, at least as we think about, when we think about preventive health, we instantly think about immediately blood tests and perhaps, if we are lucky, a little bit imaging. We never think about musculoskeletal, we never think about mind health. And our goal and objective here is to truly widen the definition. Right. And if we think about our health holistically, then these are the aspects we must be thinking about. And, you know better than me how mind health affects the physiology also. And so we have to be taking into account every aspect of this as we go forward.
Yeah, I'll be covering a lot of the elements you spoke briefly about how to take care of ourselves in my topic at the end. Thank you.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Ravi, and thank you, Dr. Sriram. Okay, so we can move on to the next questions. So as far as the moderation standpoint, Dr. Jagannath will answer questions, but the rest of the speakers, will have questions and answers at the end. So next, moving on to the next speaker. I just want to make a quote by Benjamin Franklin. Yeah, there's some static there, but anyway, quote by Benjamin Franklin: "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Early diagnosis is the next best thing to the prevention." So this is exemplified most in the management of cancer. So cancer is a huge topic, and Dr. Jagannath is going to talk about cancer care, and our renowned kidney specialist, nephrologist, kidney specialist, and multi-talented Dr. Kishore Bellamkonda is going to introduce Dr. Jagannath.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaste and greetings to all. This is really a great honor and pleasure for me to introduce Dr. P Jagannath, who is currently chairman of the surgical oncology at the S.L. Raheja Hospital and the Department of Surgical Oncology at the Leelavati Hospital and Research Center, Mumbai. Dr. Jagannath is an internationally recognized pioneer cancer surgeon in gastroenterology oncology, gastrointestinal oncology. And Dr. Jagannath graduated with MBBS from Kurnool Medical College with 10 gold medals. He then obtained Master of Surgery from YUPP in Pondicherry. Following that, he joined Tata Memorial Hospital in 1982, where he had 20 years of experience as Professor of Surgical Oncology and Chief of Gastrointestinal Service. Then in 2002, he moved to his current position in Mumbai. Dr. Jagannath is an elected fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England, FRCS, and the Academy of Medical Sciences, FAMS. He published more than 100 peer-reviewed research papers in journals, chapters, and books. Dr. Jagannath is an invited speaker or chairperson at numerous international conferences and has given orations in several congresses. Apart from his exemplary professional and scholarly performance, Dr. Jagannath has been an outstanding leader in his field. In 1985, Dr. Jagannath started hepatobiliary pancreatic surgery as a specialty in India, and in 2002, he established Indian chapter of the International Hepatopancreatobiliary Association. Between 2012 and 2016, Dr. Jagannath served as the world president of the International Hepatopancreatobiliary Association, the first Indian ever to receive such a distinction. Dr. Jagannath has a long list of contributions to the community in his field. Notable among them are establishment of a comprehensive website for cancer support, which was launched by Sri Amitabh Bachchan, a foundation called Crusade Against Cancer to support children with cancer, with the help of Sri Sachin Tendulkar. Currently, he is leading the first cancer, that's the title, of a care project of the World Economic Forum for using emerging technologies to improve cancer care. Last but not the least, despite his monumental and unparalleled professional achievements and service to the community, Dr. Jagannath is a very humble and simple person, just as I knew him during our college days in Kurnool. That is a very rare virtue he possesses. Thank you very much.
Dr. Jagannath.
Thank you so much, Kishore. I do feel embarrassed in these introductions, but I'll tell you what I would really, one single line of introduction is, I am a student of Kurnool Medical College, trained by some of the greatest professors, and then in YUPP and Tata Memorial, where I learned everything which I know I do now right now. So I think these foundations were fundamental in all our growth, and I am sure it is the same across all the eminent panels here. It's really, Rajashesha Reddy garu, it's really a pleasure that you, and a privilege that you've given me this chance to speak to the entire NATA and along with the APNA and the community who are so, your leaders in US and many other countries. So I would just focus on three different themes. One is that how did we manage COVID in the pandemic? How did we manage cancer in the pandemic? This is because you have a lot of lay audience also. As doctors, we do know what was happening. And second thing is that how did we, I'm still having the, how did we manage the care after the pandemic, and what is the future directions as to what we are going to have at this point of time? Now, the cancer mortality, COVID mortality has been widely put by, by controversial numbers of from the government of India and the WHO. Let's not get into that. But what really matters is that many succumb to diseases like renal, cardiac, and of course cancer, as healthcare facilities, as all of you know, were overburdened with COVID patients. Many of you have experienced COVID from the other side. We as doctors have experienced COVID from the hospitals, where nothing could stop and it only escalated and had different dimensions. All of us know that the three periods of pandemic were the first wave when, somewhere in March 2020, where suddenly I was actually in New York in February, came back, and then straight away was swept away by the first wave. When we were just about relaxing, the Delta tsunami hit us. That was actually the most traumatic period. And finally, the Omicron did not spare anyone, including my 95-year-old father, who came out fairly, I would say, without any problem, all thanks to vaccination. So if the single message for every one of you, there's nothing but vaccination as far as COVID is concerned. That's all. And nothing needs to be scared about. And that is one thing which I like to have a clear-cut message for all of you. The healthcare professionals like me and many others had three different dimensions. We were caregivers on one point, and we also became patients in the same period. But we were able to influence policy. This was a very important role where some of us could actually make sure that the policies are in tune with science and not with whims and fancies. This is a very important contribution by a lot of medical professionals in India and across the world. Every doctor, nurse, and I must say that nurses and paramedical staff, they were on the real front line. As consultants, we had a little bit of a fortunate thing so that we were at least not on 24/7 duty, but many of these people were on 24/7 duty. And many of the doctors became patients, particularly when the COVID information was inadequate. And at least they estimated that 800 doctors died in India and nearly 80,000 across the world. More than the deaths, many of my friends still suffer from long COVID. They are breathless, they are weak, they are unable to be productive in the usual way. So this is something which we need to understand and carefully look into that. We fortunately could manage the policy as well as the media. This therapy, when in the beginning, was biggest problem was, as in the world over, the ICUs were just flooded, and then there was nothing we could do about it. And immediately there was a SOS from the government that 80% of the hospital beds had to be for COVID. And then what do we do for cancer? All elective surgeries had to be stopped for cancer. That was the real situation. And of course, there was a shortage of PPE kits, and the staff were continuously getting quarantined. At that time, the quarantine was almost 4 weeks. So they were off work for 4 weeks. And there was very acute shortage of all the staff. This is something which right now it looks like a very bad dream, but this is reality. And the challenges for the cancer patients were multifold. Their surgeries got postponed. Someone who was scheduled for surgery in a week or 10 days time had to be told that we cannot operate on you. Radiation machines had to be closed because there was no way to keep sterilizing this equipment, or even the staff had to be problems. Chemotherapy was a huge blow. And access for travel. Unfortunately, in India, the number of cancer centers are few. People travel all the way, right from every corner of India to Mumbai, to Delhi, to Bangalore, to seek cancer care. And the lockdowns prevented from their travel. So this was something which was very difficult to handle. Drugs suddenly disappeared, and then drugs could not be procured for chemotherapy. Imaging has stopped. CT scanners suddenly for all COVID lungs, and they could not manage any of the regular investigations for the cancer patients. The patients had to wait agonizingly. And every single one of them knows one thing, that the lockdowns are not going to stop cancer. Cancer will continue, and that's a big reason for them to have multiple points of stress. And not only that, they had unimaginable stress for the whole family. I can just tell you a few true stories. My own good friend, my chartered accountant actually, whom they had operated for a sarcoma way back in 1998, on regular follow-ups in 20 and 21, the CT centers, no one was willing to come to the hospital. And by the time things got better, the CT showed a lung metastasis. And that lung metastasis, unfortunately, was involving the innominate artery, a very critical vessel in the heart. And then we had to fall back on chemotherapy, but there was some partial response. But again, in 2022, unfortunately, there's a progression of disease. A treatable cancer had advanced to a risk for life for someone who had the access to care, but could not produce or could not have the right diagnostic follow-up in the right time. Surgeries for us was something which we can't even imagine now. We were in our PPE spacesuits, sweating away, having, in 4 hours time, exhausted. And this continued to happen for almost 6 months time, because we decided at that time that we will not stop surgeries for cancer. All the obstructed colons, any patient who was symptomatic, we were there every single day in the hospital. Our resident staff were there for 2 years continuously, and we operated. We operated all major hepatobiliary surgeries in this COVID times, because there was no way we could stop surgeries, and we could convince the administration that cancer has a priority and had to be taken care. But there were big problems as to how the patients had to reach the center. All the way from in Jharkhand, CS stomach continued to lose blood, and he had to be transfused multiple times for 6 months. Finally, he could come down and operate. And the same thing for police permissions for travel all the way from Jaipur. And then I had to literally phone up the commissioners in 3 states to make sure that the patient reaches Mumbai for surgery. These are the huge hardships. So effects of COVID-19 pandemic in short were, patients are of course much more vulnerable. Delayed diagnosis was delayed. Screening programs completely stopped. Patients were much more reluctant, rightfully so, of coming to the hospitals. Treatment pathways had to be altered because no longer were repeated cycles of chemotherapy possible. Many of the patients had to be deprioritized. Elective cancer work had to be postponed, and sometimes this was led to delays and suboptimal care. And clinical trials, which are so essential for long-term therapy development, were all suspended because there was no way to recruit patients for this. Chemotherapy really has suffered most. Every time they used to come to the hospital, they had to have an RT-PCR, drugs were not available, daycares, which are the bedrock of chemotherapy, are all closed, and the staff were not available because they were all diverted for COVID duties, and every protocol had to be reworked. This is the data actually coming from India, from National Cancer Grid. Look at the numbers. The number of patients fell by 54%. Tata Hospital, which normally takes about 30,000 patients a year, this just could not even have 54% across. This is across India. And the follow-up visits just did not happen. Admissions did not happen. Outpatient chemotherapy crashed completely. Surgeries were down. Diagnostic tests were not available. And of course, patient accessing radiotherapy really came down. So in every dimension of cancer, the care fell by 50%. What is the impact? What has actually happened to these patients? Time alone will tell. But I know for certain that many of the patients who are otherwise amenable for treatment could not get their treatment in time, because the cancer doesn't stop. The screenings may stop, the journeys may stop, the cancer doesn't stop. But let me tell you one thing, there has been a significant adaptation to this crisis. Because what I always feel is every threat is an opportunity. Suddenly we found that distributed cancer became essential. Every second-tier city, patients were treated. My students are across all over the country in about 30 cities. Every one of them stepped up. They all started operating in the same way as I would do it. And then I was so happy that same Whipple's, liver, everything was now being done, not in big cities, not in metros, but in tier 2 cities, way away from Mumbai, Nasik, Pune, and many other cities undertook the treatment of cancer patients, which was very, very important. This centralization and the waiting for treatment of 3 months to 4 months were completely altered, and this is very important. Telemedicine was rapidly adopted. Till then, the government was dragging their feet on telemedicine, but it is rapidly adopted. On all the legal hurdles were removed, and many of the centers, including Apollo and many other players, came into telemedicine in a big way, and we converted all our consults into a teleconsultation platform with a good data, good kind of a multi-structured platform. Our outpatients were all screened. Our outpatients followed literally, and the comfort of the home, which patients really appreciated. Someone sitting in Assam, coming all the way to Mumbai, just for showing a few follow-up visits and follow-up tests, not necessary anymore. And the doctors were comfortable because they were sitting at home and then doing their follow-ups. I was sitting in my home in Hyderabad when we moved, and then we did the consults on every single day. And both the doctors and patients were happy that their follow-ups could be taken care by a virtual consult. We did MDTs. We had a net group meeting where there was a pathologist, there was a radiation oncologist, and a surgeon and a chemotherapist, all coming together exactly like an MDT which you would have in your hospital, and do everything by VC. And this kind of avoided unnecessary travel. Believe me, 30 to 40% of patients who come to Mumbai are only to be told that they are advanced and nothing can be done for them. All these patients can now be comfortably seen on an MDT, and unnecessary travel, unnecessary expense for the whole family can be avoided by just using technology. And we could deliver standard care. It was not as though that is suboptimal care, because all this information was all possible by an MDT. So the hybrid approach has come to stay. We will never be going back completely to physical follow-ups. Yes, once we know that there's something to be taken care, they will certainly come. Otherwise, they can comfortably do a hybrid approach. So now let me move to the cancer care and the post-COVID. What really is going to be for the future? And that's where I'll leave you with some thoughts. Adaptation was very, very important. That's what we did. Second thing, what I realized very early, access to care. Access to care was completely absent. Access to care was absent, particularly for the most vulnerable population, the rural population, the urban poor could not come to the hospitals at all. So access to care is the single most important focus for you and for us, that today we have to have access to care for NCDs, not for COVID anymore, for NCDs, because that is the biggest bulk of morbidity and mortality in India and in the developing countries. So we can move the consults, follow up, and even plan the treatments using technology. Hybrid is come to stay. And we can also teach people, because there is no longer necessity for us. We have now learned over the many, maybe too many Zoom webinars, that we can teach people. We can also use newer technologies for learning and teaching. And the phase which I'm coming to is the use of emerging technologies. A simple example is that we used to go to all these countries like Nepal, Bhutan. I'm sure you also traveled doing your outreach programs, but that could not be done anymore. But we started this virtual outreach program. It's highly successful. Cambodia, Vietnam, Bhutan, all these countries which were completely isolated, nobody could reach them, were now connected on the virtual outreach of the IHPBA, where the worldwide experts could talk to them and also talk on the clinical problems, the problems what they are facing, and that we could solve from across the continents. So virtual consults across the continents are now very, very feasible and is being implemented by many of the societies. Now, Satya talked a little bit about Hololens, which we are now using it for enhancing education experience, because more than anything else, the AR and VR are going to transform. And in fact, I was reading today a post by Bill Gates that metaverse, though we think it's sometime in the future, is knocking at our doorstep. And we will see that we will find that the augmented reality and the VR is going to make a difference. Look at this, that I can actually see a liver. I can move the liver in front of me and see the bile ducts and plan a treatment for this patient. And this planning can be done by 3 different centers, one in Japan, one in Singapore, one in India, by 3 consultants who are experts in hepatobiliary surgery, studying the model and saying that, oh, this is what I would do. This is going to add a new dimension to teaching and learning. I'll leave you with this last portion of the first cancer care. So what is first cancer care? Is a World Economic Forum project. On the World Cancer Day, we released the white paper, which is open source. Anybody can use it, and what actually can be done to transform cancer care in India. The 4th industrial revolution, as has been coined by the World Economic Forum, is now use of technologies like AI, drones, blockchain, data, IoT, and robotics for making a difference. And when Honorable Prime Minister launched it, he says, solutions can be for India and for the world using the fourth industrial revolution. What did we do so far? We formed a core group of nearly 25 technologists and clinicians, and found first thing is found very critical areas where there are gaps in cancer care. And then we did a technology survey and found 30 interventions. And this was across by all the majors, Microsoft, Dell, everybody, including the startups. And the interventions are in 3 different formats. One is, of course, system, citizen and patient, and providers. So we have 30 interventions all mapped out, right from screening to palliative care, the continuum of care, the data, payment pathways, everything has been mapped out very, very clearly, and interventions have been mapped out. Now, how do we then translate it? It's fine to be having a plan, but how do we implement? And this is the approach, is that think big, start very small, and scale fast. Now, what we have done so far is come up to starting the small pilot projects. And this is what I really want your inputs on this. This is a proposal which has been accepted by the governments of Telangana and Meghalaya and Assam in 3 districts: Sirsila, East Kasi, which is the highest incidence of cancer, and Kamrup districts. One single district, the entire population. The major cancer types, which will be breast, cervical, oral, which all of you know, and oral and esophageal cancer, which is very, very high in Meghalaya. So we want to scan the entire district population with a multi-pronged approach. And in all these things, only the very high-end AI emerging technologies will be utilized. And then we'll have a kind of a data in the community. For the first time, we are reaching the community. And Adisha Reddy garu, what you said is absolutely clear. We have other than prevention, which is tobacco cessation and all that, early diagnosis is the single most important tool for us for cancer control. I continue to see stage 3 and stage 4. I want to see in the next decade stage 1 and stage 2, because we have solutions for stage 1 and stage 2, and we can control for a long time stage 1 and stage 2. So this is the entire focus of stage shifting to 1 and 2 by screening the population when they are symptomatic or even before they are symptomatic for a high risk population. And then we'll be able to win the war. So right from tobacco cessation to technology-led screening, the healthcare worker learning phase, and the entire shift is going to be from doctors to nurses to front healthcare workers. It's the skilling of the nurses and healthcare workers which is most important. So we are going to do that all by good platforms which are going to be mobile friendly, very user friendly, and where their learning becomes a very, very easy and very important. So we need partners like you to have these pilots, because one agency or one organization cannot do it. I really look forward to your help, support, and advice in how we can take it forward. And if we show that this happens in 3 districts, it is scalable across the states and even the whole country. So I always say that, Joe Biden is very fond of the moonshot, which rightly so. I know that this is a big challenge. We all know that cancer is a huge challenge. But if we all work together, I'm sure millions of lives can be saved. And this will be even far bigger than putting the man on the moon, because we'll be saving millions. And thank you very much for this opportunity once more. And my sincere gratitude to each one of you, and look forward to your advice, opinion, and of course, participation in this whole exercise. And we can make a difference together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jagannath. So it was very wonderful and humane and compassionate type of speech for humanity, specifically cancer victims. So we are running a little bit short of time, but if somebody has a pressing question, let's go ahead and ask Dr. Jagannath before we move on to the next subject.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sanjeev.
Yeah, this is Sanjeeva Reddy. I'm a gastroenterologist in New Orleans, USA. Dr. Jagannath, that was an excellent talk. We faced the same problems as you did in the beginning of the COVID pandemic. We had a lot of things postponed. We couldn't do endoscopies, we couldn't do surgeries. the whole hospitals were filled with COVID patients, but slowly we are getting back to the normal. And I totally agree with you, the bad events leading to the good things. The telehealth has become pretty good, even in this country, especially in India, when you don't have very many specialists like we have here. It's very important to have these telehealth consultations. People coming from Kadapa to Bombay is not going to happen when you are in Bombay to get your opinion on how to do the surgeries, what kind of surgeries they can have. So these things can be easily managed on the telehealth. You can actually tell the people back in Andhra Pradesh or wherever they are in India, try to do what to do and what not to do with regard to their problems. That will be a great asset for the experts who can actually go on telehealth and give a consultation. So that's going to be a good thing, even in this country.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sanjeev. Yeah, very good. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? Or?
Yeah, telehealth in this, Dr. Mohan, Dr. Jagannath. Yeah, telehealth has picked up now. As you know, in US, this public health emergency is still going on. And they said it is until July 15th because of the good reimbursement by Medicare and other healthcare insurances. The telehealth has picked up, and we had to wait and see what is going to happen after the public health emergency is over, which is supposed to be on July 15th of this year. We'll see what happens.
No, interestingly, now patients want it. So it's no longer a question of we want it. Patients want to sit in their homes and then send the reports and get a consultation. So it will be driven by the consumer, and it will also be a great healthcare system because you'll avoid people coming in and all the entire process of registration, and they get the same expertise and care. As long as we ensure the same quality of experts across, then we are now going to create a pool of experts who will have, like volunteer their time, and they all can be taken care. I am expecting at least 60 to 70% of patients to be satisfied with the opinion and seek a local care, which also we can recommend. Yeah. Which also we can recommend that you go here. These are the people who are trained, well trained, and your job is done. That is a big benefit, as you know, in India. So we can actually, instead of centralizing them, having a distributed quality cancer care.
Yeah, very inspiring, very true, very inspiring. And also the HIPAA guidelines also are relaxed in this country, the confidentiality guidelines. So appreciate it. We do what we can. We whatever you think we can do, we'll be happy to. Thank you very much, Dr. Jagannath. If feel free to hang around, or if you want to step aside, which is your call. So we appreciate your time.
I'll be on for till 10 o'clock, and then maybe then I'll.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. So moving on to the next subject. So I want introduction to be limited just to 2-minute introduction, and please, the speakers, stick with your time, 15-20 minutes talk. So the next topic is sleep is one of the most important but least understood aspects of our life. We suffer from devastating consequences. Okay, please turn the other phone off. Okay, we suffer devastating consequences when we don't sleep. Compared to the other basic drive. Okay, compared to the other basic drives, such as eating, drinking, and reproducing, the purpose of sleep remains elusive. So there's a lot of unknown in the sleep. So Dr. Prasad Garimala will clarify us about the sleep. He's also going to talk about sleep as well as long COVID symptoms. And Dr. Prasad Garimala is a highly accomplished pulmonologist, that is lung specialist, in case public don't know what pulmonologist is, and has been one of the top doctor list of Atlanta since 2019, Atlanta, USA. He graduated from my alma mater and Dr. Jagannath's alma mater, Kurnool Medical College, and did his pulmonary fellowship at my old stomping ground, Cook County Hospital in Chicago. He has been practicing in Atlanta since 2004 And he is going to talk about, as I said, long COVID and sleep. Sleep is the most important thing. Of course, long COVID also is very, very important. He's going to talk about it. So without any further delay, let me turn over to Dr. Prasad Garimala.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and namaste to all. It is my pleasure, privilege, and honor to participate in NATA, API, and APNA's collaborative to a holistic, preventive, and proactive topic. It gives an immense pleasure for me to be participating in this. We're always reacting to the diseases. To be able to prevent or send that preventive message gives me an immense pleasure. I appreciate and commend the all the work that is done by people to come up with this webinar. It is very commendable. Thank you again. I'm from Kurnool Medical College. Again, it is all the information that I got is coming through me and not from me. And with the prostrations and gratitude to all the people, including my professors at Kurnool Medical College and all the people who trained me. I'll spare me another 15 minutes or so. I'll try to hit the main points because the audience are predominantly non-medical people. I'll try to go slow. And the two topics I'm going to talk about are, one is sleep and the second one is post-COVID. So off the bat, I'll give you the take-home message. It is very, very important. We all know that the sleep is very important. And I'll tell you the take-home message. Please read this book by Dr. Matthew Walker. It's called Why We Sleep. It's a phenomenal book. And I think it should be in the elementary schools and not the elementary schools, but the high schools all across the world. So Why We Sleep, he wrote a beautiful book. Nobody could express that in 20 or so more elegantly than his book can. So sleep can make us happier, safer, smarter, and more productive. What else we need in life? So it's going to make us happier, safer, smarter, and more productive. So, and he gives all the information that is needed, the scientific evidence for that, and how we can change it. So in his words, I'm just using these next 5 quotes by him, Matthew Walker: non-negotiable biological necessity. And it's one of the drives that we all have. We can't live without it. To give an example, if people cannot sleep for 5 days or so in a row, that can lead to death. So that's how vital and important it is. It is life support system. So it is supporting our life. So that dance, the 16 hours on, it is like a cosmic dance. So 16 hours on in our mind, and then 8 hours off on an average for the adult is what is keeping us healthy, happy, safe, and productive. So that is why it is very, very essential that we all realize how biologically essential sleep is. It's a life support system. And then it is the most powerful elixir that the nature can provide to us. By knowing over a period of millions of that evolution of the human evolution, so the chemicals, the needed material are being produced at the right time for us every day. So we are all born with our own pharmacy. What is needed for our mind, for our body, and its health of the mind and the body is being produced in our own mind and body. So the sleep, by producing these hormones, the chemicals, will auto adjust itself to the stresses that are brought to us. So in other words, like Dr. Matthew Walker mentioned, Swiss Army knife of health. So it has everything that you need so that you can fix your health if there is a problem. And it is definitely not an optional lifestyle luxury. Compared to 100 years ago, humanity currently is getting at least 75 to 90 minutes less sleep compared to just 100 years ago. So it is very, very important that we don't take it granted. and we take essential care of our sleep so it can take care of our health. So the four primary pillars, if you are sitting on a chair, say for example, it has 4 legs. So the sleep depends on these 4 legs. So sleep quantity, sleep quality, sleep regularity, and sleep hygiene. If we maintain those 4 of those legs, obviously we'll have a stable sleep and thereby stable health. So the first leg is basically the sleep quantity. We know this is for adults. At least 7 hours of sleep is very essential for us. So in other words, if we prepare any kind of a dish, we all cook, if you prepare a curry, the right ingredients need to go at the right time. And then the duration that you are cooking it is also very, very important. If you don't cook for enough duration, obviously it's not a palatable or nutritious dish. Similarly, if you do too much, that's a problem. So it's a J-shaped curve, and 7 to 8 hours of sleep is what we all need to aim for. So when we are talking about sleep quantity, it's reiterating, basically the ultimate outcome of this is the vitality for the body and meaning for our life. So there are multiple studies that have shown, so better quality of sleep, better quantity of sleep will improve the attractiveness of the person, the weight loss. It is considered a weight loss medicine, having a good quality sleep and quantity sleep. Cognition will be better, vigilance will be improved, concentration, memory, learning, the emotional balance of the person, the fitness is much better, especially more, it's proven in a lot of athletes, if they have better sleep, the performance is going to be much better physically and obviously for mentally too. So the energy maintenance of the body is where our fountain of life comes out. So the energy maintenance is well regulated when there is a good sleep. The immunity, the hormones, the restoration, the repair. Repair is the key part. We think it is a very passive state. No, actually there is a lot of repair to the body and to the mind that is happening while we are sleeping for those 8 hours. So the flip side of it is, if we don't get our quantity of sleep, which is 7 to 8 hours of sleep, what is going to happen? It is linked to all these outcomes much more than this. What I'm listing here, the dementia is linked to it, the accidents are linked to it, poor productivity, school work performance gets affected, cancers. WHO has come up with this, night shift work or lack of sleep is one of the potential carcinogenic risk factors. So the obesity, like we said, if you have a good sleep, you are less likely to gain all that weight. If you don't get good sleep, you are going to gain weight and thereby leading on to the other problems like diabetes, hypertension, or heart attacks. So tired and hungry, or you can also call it as hungry and angry. So either whatever word you take, if you don't have good sleep, you're going to be either hungry or hangry. So we all notice that, when we are not sleeping well, next day, we are not going to be at our best. So that's about the sleep quantity. So let's move on to the next leg, which is the sleep quality. And there is a lot of research, the research going on for the past 50 years or so. It's one of the youngest branches of medicine that, as we know, is sleep medicine. So what do we know about it is that, we need continuous, uninterrupted sleep. If you sleep for 8 hours, but you are constantly woken up by internal or external factors, that's not going to be good quality sleep. They're as tired as somebody who is drunk. So why is that so important? Because there is an internal cleansing or detoxing that happens while we are sleeping. So in other words, if you have the street roads, they are going to be cleaned. Or another example I can give is a library. So if all the books in the library are not put back together, so it's going to be very hard and disorganized system for us to retrieve a book when it is needed. Similarly, this drainage is basically like while we are sleeping, the neuronal cells, the neurons are going to shrink and the glial cells are going to open up and basically create a drainage system So the toxins that are generated by our activity during daytime are going to be cleansed out of the mind, out of the brain, so that you are more sharper next day. So other things that we know about sleep is basically there are 5 stages. So recent classification, the stage 3 and 4 combined together are called delta sleep. So technically we have 4 stages of sleep. Sleep 1 being the non-REM sleep, or stage 1 is basically the lightest of the sleeps. Then stage 2, then 3 and 4 together are called delta. And then we have this special rapid eye movement sleep where most of the dreaming occurs. So this is all regulated by our internal clock system that is both genetically highly regulated and evolutionarily preserved from the time of the fruit flies. See, fruit flies are very tiny. That's how the sleep research is done on the fruit flies. So they take the same similar genetic mechanisms that are happening in a fruit fly are still happening in our mind, in our brain. So the other thing that we know are process C, which is a circadian rhythm, and then process H, which is homeostatic. So the rhythm is maintained by the process C, the drive is maintained by the process H, or homeostatic mechanism. To give an example, circadian rhythm is maintained by the sun and our activity level. The primary thing is the sun. The sunlight exposure will suppress our sleep chemicals and improve our wake chemicals. When the sun goes away, then the melatonin gets produced and our sleep chemicals are going to build up and our wake promoting chemicals are going down. So that's a nice cosmic dance or a rhythm that you can see that maintains our 16 hours on, 8 hours off. Then what we call these regulators, how all this is happening is mainly by these cues or regulators that are happening, whether they are external or internal. So in a German word was used to describe this, there's called Zeitgebers. So again, going back to the preparing the dish, so there are 6 centers in the brain that actually produce the sleep promoting chemicals that are produced at the right time and right doses for us to be able to maintain a good quality sleep while we are refreshing, regenerating, and repairing our body and mind. So the internal regulators are these chemicals. So some of them are wake promoting, some of them are sleep promoting. The external ones, 95% of the time it is the sunlight, the activity and food also play into the role of our regulation also. So what is the outcome of all this is these good hormones that are being produced at the right time. These hormones are going to maintain every aspect of our health and our life and our ability to be a human being. So the growth hormone is so vital and important. And as we age, we get less of it. If we maintain a good quality sleep, at least we will get what we are supposed to get for our age group. So this ends the second leg, which is the sleep quality. The third thing I want to focus is the sleep regularity. Sleep regularity means you want to go to the bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. The wake up time is called the cue time. That's how body kind of readjusts for the next day. The cue time, in other words, what time you've gotten out of the sleep is what it is trying to fix. So for any rhythm, you need to have a fixed thing upon which the rhythm builds up. So the cue time, the time that we wake up is such an essential thing. And you want to avoid the social jet lag. What does social jet lag mean? We sleep, maybe get about only 4 to 5 hours during the workday, but over the weekend, you sleep longer. That is not actually a healthy habit. So you want to sleep at the same time and wake up at the same time, even whether you're working or not. So that is very, very essential. We, Indians across the world, especially the people, non-resident Indians, we are notorious for our late night parties and that social obligation. I strongly recommend whatever you do it maybe like around 3 o'clock so that everybody leaves your home by 10 o'clock. I know it is not a fashionable statement from my side, but I'm telling you, if you have 50 people you are inviting, everybody's sleep is affected that night. You're actually giving him some trouble so that, that night, even though there's a lot of pleasure from a meeting, but there is also something that if we are going till 1 o'clock at night, that is not good. So I think collectively we should start the parties early so that everybody sleep at a reasonable time. Why are we doing it? Mainly, we all have the internal clock, and there is an external clock which is in the form of sun. So the sync or the coordination between these two is what gives the sleep regularity. So the sleep regularity will lead on to us produce a body and mind to produce the brain to produce these hormones of metabolism, which are produced at a particular time. If they are not produced at the particular time, you're losing that chance. So the hormone imbalance will automatically lead on to the problems. It builds up like an iceberg phenomenon. While it is happening, we may not be noticing it, but once a threshold effect occurs, that's when all the disease manifestation occurs. And one last point on the sleep regularity is sneezing is not good. It is not good for the body or the brain. And basically, do not snooze. Get up at the right time that you intended to get up, and then maintain that time so that body has ability to auto-adjust. That completes the third leg, which is the sleep regularity.
Sorry to interrupt. We have 10 more minutes. That's what the timekeeper has informed me.
Absolutely. Sure thing. Thank you again. So the fourth leg is basically the sleep hygiene. What do we mean that? While we are sleeping, you don't want any interruptions to occur, and we want to encourage a good quality sleep. So it has to be dark and cold and avoid any kind of external stimulation. So the darkness is going to be key. So I strongly recommend people to buy an eye mask while they are sleeping, so that preventing that light, whatever it is coming from, a simple light that is coming from a TV monitor, the blue light, or any other place, we have a lot of this light that escapes, that is also going to interrupt with the sleep. So that's why darkness is very important. If you can do it externally, like blackout curtains, that's good. In spite of it, that our electronics will emit some of the light. So do an eye mask if you can. It's very easy to get adapted. Cold, roughly about 65 degrees of Fahrenheit is a good temperature. Our body temperature goes down by half a centigrade whenever we are trying to sleep. So that's why I think keeping it cold will encourage better sleep. And avoid the stimulants, caffeine, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, in whatever form that is coming, whatever form these stimulants are coming, we need to, or the suppressants are coming, we need to stop them or control or eliminate or even limit as much as you can. The sun time, like we said, a sign being the Zeitgeber, primary Zeitgeber, or a controller of our sleep-wake cycle, it's very important that we don't get too much exposure to any light after 6 p.m. Or 7 p.m. after the sunset. And, that's why it's very important. To overcome this, sometimes we use the light boxes or phototherapy to adjust the rhythms of the sleep-wake cycle. Screen time is a key. So I kind of putting this, f.lux. If you download that app on any computer or on your phone, it will automatically decrease the light, especially the blue light that the screens are emitting, so that your melatonin is not suppressed, so that you have a better sleep. So encourage people to download or use some other kind of a blocker of blue light. Then worry time, stress versus, stress that comes through the day activity needs to be put down. So either writing down the problems, and the other thing that strongly recommend is, like, we only live in our present, we never live in the past or future. So these 4 P's, being positive with life, being present, being purposeful with our activities, and driven by the principles. If we do those 4, that worry time automatically comes down. We have the shock absorber to take care of that stress that the world throws at us. And then nutrients, magnesium, potassium are very important. Low glucose is related to low motivation. And that ends these 4 pillars or 4 legs of a sleep on which the health is built on. So one last slide I have on sleep is basically, these are the sleep disorders. As sleep specialists and many of the physicians will be taking care of it. If you have any of these disorders, please reach out to your primary care doctor or the specialist, and they will be able to take you to a better quality and quantity of sleep. So I'll move on quickly with to the post-COVID syndrome. What is post-COVID syndrome? As we know, this COVID-19, it is affecting, it goes through the stages. The first phase is the viral phase, then the inflammatory phase. And most of the people have improvement in their symptoms by 4-week period. But, but some people, even if they had mild disease, they continue to have the symptoms that they experience after that initial recovery. So if the symptoms persist more than 4 weeks after the diagnosis, that is called the post-COVID syndrome. And so there are many names for that, because most of the COVID information came into the world through non-medical media. So we got most of the information through not journals, but sometimes these TV channels and social media. So there are a lot of names that are colloquially used: long haulers, long COVID syndrome, and there's a medical term. So there's still a lot of clarity that is needed for post-COVID syndrome. Next slide. Whenever we had COVID as intensivist somebody who's working in the ICU, we have seen these severe damage that occurred in about 2 to 5% of the people who got the COVID. Depending on the variant, we had more, some had less. And, we have seen patients who are like being prone, 20-year-old, 22-year-old, who we lost some of them, we saved some of them. But many of these people had not only lung involvement primarily, they also had other major organs in the body that are involved: heart, the kidneys, the brain. And they took a longer time to recover from that organ damage. So that organ damage can also prolong, and that organ damage led to some of the COVID symptoms. So in some people, it led to these, life-changing, very unfortunate events of heart failures, kidney failures, the strokes, and then some Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is basically a temporary paralysis. So who gets a post-COVID? Most of the time, somebody who doesn't have this robust immunity. That's usually older people and people who have medical conditions, more likely to have these symptoms. But even the young, otherwise healthy people have the post-COVID syndrome also. And what are the common symptoms? Fatigue is by far the worst and most common of the post-COVID syndromes. I have seen friends, family, and my patients who have fatigue, and I'm not sure how we treat it. There is not a generalized treatment protocol or management protocol or even diagnostic protocols available, unfortunately. But that's one of the most common symptoms. And then we have seen, as pulmonologists, the post-COVID cough, post-COVID shortness of breath, some rheumatological conditions like joint pains, the chest pain, the muscle pains, the memory concentration, what they call the COVID brain, or the fogging that can happen. Then obviously the palpitations, which is related to the heart, and the heart beating faster or slower, and depression, anxiety. Our good friend Dr. Kalli is going to, Ravi Garu is going to talk about that in next topic. And then fevers, persistent fevers, dizziness when they stand, we call it as orthostasis. And then one of the other things is any physical or mental activity. They are okay when they are resting. With any activity, they are having trouble. So the diagnosis, unfortunately, there is no single test for us to confirm the diagnosis. It is by exclusion. And depending on the symptoms and the exam, your physician may recommend lab tests, imaging, and referral to a specialist. So there are some blood tests that can be done. A 6-minute walk test, a breathing test, or a CAT scan is what we normally do in the pulmonary or a lung field. Cardiologists will do a stress test or an echocardiogram to evaluate for these things. And then obviously, if your symptoms are there more than 4 weeks or so post-diagnosis, I strongly recommend that you reach out to your physician, see if there are any reversible conditions that can be reversed to decrease or alleviate the symptoms. And like I said earlier, there is no specific treatment for post-COVID syndrome. It also depends on what kind of symptoms they have. and which specialist and what studies have kind of guided the patient and then the doctor to get the best remedy or alleviation of the symptoms. And so far, the available data is very limited by the sample size. It's very, very hard to do a reliable research. And most of the time, the reliable research takes few years. By the time, hopefully, the pandemic and all these symptoms are gone, we wish that for the rest of the world that we learn from the COVID and we kind of that helped us to be better human beings by taking care of our health first, then our families, and obviously give the best to the world around us. That's my last slide, and I will take the questions at the end of all the presentations.
Thank you very much, Prasad. Excellent talk, very timely. Both topics are very timely. I think I have a lot of questions on the sleep, but I think we need to move on in the interest of time. So I'll go to the next. Diabetes potentially affects all of us and has at least potential to affect all of us, and has a huge impact on various body systems and functions. And Dr. Padmaja Adusumalli will be introduced by APNA President, Dr. Praveen Sampath. Praveen, are you logged in?
Yes, Dr. Reddy, my video is not working. It says disabled.
Okay, go ahead. Anyway, we know who you are. We saw you initially, at least.
Hello, everyone.
Go ahead.
I'm Praveen Sampath. I'm a gastroenterologist in Austin, Texas. I'm also the president of APNA Foundation. Thanks to Dr. Reddy. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Padmaja Adusumalli. She's a very good friend of us, very active in the APNA Foundation, who has a great interest in community health and community health education. Dr. Adusumalli is a resident of Kansas City, where she did her internal medicine residency and practices at the VA Medical Center as an internal medicine physician and geriatrics. She's originally a graduate of Guntur Medical College. Very, very active in the community health, and diabetes is one of her passions. And as Dr. Reddy rightfully said, growing incidence of diabetes among the Indian population, and without taking too much time, I give the stage to Dr. Adusumalli.
Yeah, go ahead. Padmaja, go ahead.
I think it's a video
it's MP4
forwarded.
file I sent.
Yeah. I think the audio is not coming through though.
We can hear you, Andy, and see you.
So Padmaja, can you go ahead and initiate the conversation while they're working on the video and all that?
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead and start talking about it?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, so to enter in the time, conserve the time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Adishesha Reddy Garu, for letting me know that it's better to go ahead and start with the conversation. Meanwhile, while we are getting the details, my topic is, why do we all need to know about diabetes? My opinion, diabetes is a silent killer. It is affecting so many people knowingly or unknowingly. We have diagnosed patients, a lot of patients, and we have a lot of undiagnosed citizens, both in India as well as in America. Especially both of our Telugu states are getting a lot more affected. And I would like to bring this to attention of every one of us to notice the earlier symptoms of pre-diabetes that, like Dr. Satya Sriram mentioned earlier. That's where my topic is going to be. Can I have the slides, please? Okay.
Ram Reddy, I guess they must be working on it, Padmaja. So
okay.
Please bear with them.
Okay. Once I get the slides, I can give you the numbers. Thank you. I will unmute myself, and then there is a video recording there. or if it is, then I can go ahead and continue the talk. Diabetes, as I mentioned, is a silent killer. Diabetes and obesity caused more deaths during COVID as well as after the COVID. Here, can you go to the slide before? Okay.
Sorry, Andy. Since it's a MP4, we cannot go back to the slides, Andy. So go ahead and continue the speech, Andy. Generally.
Yeah, do the best you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think in India, that's where I'm very, very concerned that we as Indians, we have a highest incidence of diabetes diagnosed and highest incidence of undiagnosed diabetes. I really want to pay attention that I want to bring this attention to bring this concern to all of our citizenry in India, as well as our Indian origin Americans too. The numbers, I am not able to remember the exact incidence of diabetes in India, but 77 million Indians do have diabetes at this time, and there are so many undiagnosed. Diabetes, there are a lot of risk factors, especially our diet. Anyone over the age of 45 or anyone that is had a family history, either by a parent or a sibling or a daughter that had diabetes, or if they had a history of polycystic ovary disease in women, as well as gestational diabetes, or if they had given a birth to more than 9 pounds baby, they are at increased risk. Currently, a lot of Indians, as well as our Indians that are working in the IT fields, even in US, they are doing these telehealth jobs or tele jobs where it's less physically active, sitting in front of the computers, being in the office rooms, attending the calls and all. So you might have heard in your communities that a lot more people are having sudden cardiac death. And we most of the time may not know exactly how, but these sudden cardiac deaths are undiagnosed cardiac disease as a complication of diabetes. The numbers right now, some of the slides I had shown how it causes cardiac disease. Pre-diabetes is what I wanted to pay attention to. Pre-diabetes, as it means, it's a precursor to the diabetes. That means it's a one step or one stage before diabetes. This main feature of pre-diabetes and why it is caused is by insulin resistance, meaning our body is giving a lot of resistance to insulin. Even though insulin is our own body creation, the inflammatory mediators that are coming from fat cells or adipose tissue is making our insulin not working. So pancreas gets overworked. It's trying to produce more insulin. These higher insulin levels causes a lot of heterogeneity, meaning they cause the cholesterol plaques. And even though a patient might have cholesterol not that high, but if they had higher insulin levels, it causes the plaques. So that's how they develop the cardiac disease, and they develop the sudden cardiac arrest, and they are dying. I heard multiple patients dying in the last few days. There are two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. I'm not going to go into the details of type 1, which is genetically, and it's more common in children. In adults, type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease, which it is caused by lifestyles. It is changed by lifestyles. So I'm going to focus more on the type 2 diabetes. The pre-diabetes, as I mentioned, is a precursor. In US, the actual diagnosed diabetics are only 35 million, but 89 million American citizens do have pre-diabetes, but only 8 million people know that they have pre-diabetes. 78 million people do not know that they have diabetes. That means 1 in 9 people know that they have pre-diabetes. If we don't catch them, they go ahead and develop the diabetes and the complications due to the diabetes. The next I'm going to talk about how do we diagnose? Do we have to go to a doctor to get diagnosed as prediabetes, or are there ways that we can even look at the person and say, oh, could I be having a prediabetes? Should I get checked? And what do I get checked is my next question. When you see some patients who are, or some people that are really overweight and having a lot of abdominal obesity, and they, most of the time we hear the jokes about either men having a pregnant belly or some patients having a little bit of obesity around their abdomen. Those patients are at higher risk to develop these diabetes type 2 or prediabetes. And some patients do develop sudden acute onset of discoloration around their neck folds, under the arms, in their groin area. That reflects insulin resistance, that dark discoloration. Even a normal person looking at it, oh, he did not have it before, she did not have it before. Why is she having the dark color discoloration? Or the second one is skin tags. They are like తెలుగులో చెప్పాలంటే పులుపురు లాగా వస్తాయి. అది కూడా ప్రీడయాబెటీస్ ఉన్న పేషెంట్స్ లో కామన్ వస్తుంది. And some of the people do develop discoloration in the face area, sudden onset. Those patients, then they need to talk to their doctors. These pre-diabetic patients do have symptoms also. They feel very tired, they feel hungry, so they end up consuming a lot of calories and consequently have a severe weight gain. And with the weight gain, they do feel very tired, they feel down because they're gaining weight. They also feel depressed. As earlier, I think Dr. Garmala Garu and Dr. Sriram did mention, diabetes and depression is related, and Dr. Kohli is going to talk more about it. In teens, they do develop acne and the pre-diabetes state. They get irregular periods and later on develop polycystic ovary disease, and they do have problems with the infertility. These things a doctor doesn't need to tell you. If you have any of these symptoms, to go ahead and talk to your doctor, and the doctor or physician can check some blood test. A normal fasting blood level is less than 100. When we check these patients, pre-diabetic patients, when we check their blood sugar level, it ranges between 100 to 125 milligrams. If it is above 126, we diagnose them as diabetic. If it is above 126, on 2 separate occasions. As well as there is another test called hemoglobin A1C. That also is get checked. It tells us the blood sugars over the last 90 days. If it is above 6.5, we can diagnose them as the diabetes. If it is less than 6.5 but above 6, that is the indication for pre-diabetes. There is the third factor. These patients do tend to have higher blood pressure and higher cholesterol levels. These high cholesterol, especially in the bad cholesterol and triglycerides, the good cholesterol HDL is low. That particular configuration is an indicator for pre-diabetes. The next one I want to talk about is complications. I do not want to talk about the treatment because your physician will do. But if we don't get treated or diagnosed or treated, what complications would arise is what I want to focus on. It, all the way from the top to the bottom, starting from your eyes to your feet, you will develop a problem. We develop the problem. In the eyes, they develop earlier cataracts, and they also develop a bleeding in the eyes called diabetic retinopathy and causing blindness. And patients do develop cardiac problems with the heart attacks, heart failure, and strokes. They do develop problems with the kidney disease, going up to the end stage renal disease, needing dialysis. The next one, they do get problems with the non-healing ulcers in the legs and develop amputations. The pregnancy complications, as I mentioned earlier, and then they do develop some sexual problems in men with erectile dysfunction or impotence and amputations, as I mentioned. Diabetes or pre-diabetes, these caused by pre-diabetes, are leading causes of blindness, leading causes of end-stage renal disease needing the dialysis, leading cause for the amputations. And it also causes 2 to 4 times of the heart disease. And the one important take-home point I want you to all take home is Type 2 diabetes is preventable, changeable by your own lifestyles. That control is in your hands. That's main, especially with the diet and exercise. And my next speaker, Dr. Swarna Mandali, is a graduate of Kansas. She is going to talk more details about the diet and nutrition.
Thank you,
Thank
Padmaja.
you.
Thank you, Padma. Great talk, and it was timely and essential talk. Appreciated. But I understand that Swarna Garu is not able to join because of bad weather. So we'll move on to the next subject, and the questions for you will address at the end of the everybody speaks. So
thank you.
So next we'll go to the next speaker. So you all know how important the heart is to all of us. Dr. Enos will speak about the heart disease among Indians. So this is a huge topic, and it's going to take quite a bit of time, but because of the time limitations, we need to stick with 15 to 20 minute time to Dr. Enos. That's what my humble request. And then as to introduce Dr. Enos, one of our distinguished cardiologists and Apna Foundation board member, Dr. Bhavanand Reddy, will introduce Dr. Enos. Bhavanand.
Thank you, Dr. Adishesha Reddy Garu. As a cardiologist, the next topic that Dr. Enos is going to present is very close to my heart and mind. Basically, like we all know, pretty much like a sudden death of like two prominent athletic Indians. I will call athletic for a reason. Puneet Rajkumar, 46-year-old actor from Karnataka, and Gautam Reddy, 50-year-old IT minister from Andhra Pradesh. There are specific reasons behind that. I think to present this topic, I don't think there is any better physician or a better person than Dr. Enos, who has dedicated more than 30 years of his life and work, particularly on this topic. Just to give some little introduction about Dr. Enos, he's a graduate of University of Kerala, migrated to United States in 1970. He's the Chief Executive Officer of CADI, that is Coronary Artery Disease in Indians, a research foundation solely dedicated to the diagnosis, treatment and prevention of coronary artery disease in young persons. Dr. Enos is the principal investigator of a landmark study, which is called CADI study. This is coronary artery disease in Indians, which was published in 1996. This study demonstrated that American Indians, especially Americans of Indian origin, have coronary artery disease 3 to 4 times more prevalent than general population. He was actually selected as the top physician of America in 2003. For past 19 years, Consumer Research Council of America has recognized him as one of the top cardiologists of this country. He has organized international working group on cardiovascular disease among Southeast Asians by drawing experts from United States, UK, Canada, India, and then this was conducted 3 years in a row. He is the chair of first 2 annual Indo-US Health Summits of Heart Disease held in like New Delhi. He authored more than 100 articles published in America, British, and Indian journals. He presented more than 1,000 lectures, especially like guest lectures and grand rounds. He wrote several book chapters and books. Dr. Enos has received several awards, most particularly a Distinguished Physician Award from American Association of Physicians of Indian Origin, American Association of Cardiologists of Indian Origin. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Enos to present his next talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction and inviting me. Can I share the screen? Okay. For inviting me to speak on the why do Indians die from malignant heart disease at a young age, unraveling the enigma and mitigating the risk. Okay. This topic actually started with me some 50 years ago, and last 30 years, I have intensified my efforts In 1990, I addressed the heightened risk of heart disease in young Indians for the first time. In 1995, I linked it to lipoprotein little a. In 2018, the national NHLBI reported that 1 in 4 Indians have an abnormal cholesterol called lipoprotein A. And in 2018, the American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association jointly stated South Asian ethnicity and lipoprotein little a as heart disease risk enhancing factors. My slide is not, okay. This started from 1970 to 90. I came across 6 young Indian physicians in the 20s and in the 30s and in the 40s. One of them died, who got the first MI at the age 25, died 11 years later, waiting for the transplant. And at that time, my observation was limited to Chicago. Then soon I realized that Professor Littler in the UK noted 4 Indians having massive heart attack between the ages of 18 and 22, and he could not find a single white individual in the UK. This was followed by Balarajan reporting that death rate from heart disease among Indians aged 20 to 29 years is 3 times higher than the whites. This is the angiogram from my friends at the age of 37 who had a heart attack out of the blue, and he had a large coronary arteries. There is a pervasive myth that Indians have small coronary arteries. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is the same angiogram of the same individual 10 years later. Anyone would say that the person has extremely small coronary arteries, but this was rapid malignant progression of the heart disease. By age 47, he had ejection fraction 25%, and he was practically inoperable, and he was identified to have very high levels of lipoprotein little a, and that led to my coining the term malignant heart disease in young Indians. Nobody bothered, and many of the distinguished Indian professors said, heart disease is heart disease, nothing different about Indians. I made the observations, there are 4 of them: extreme prematurity, severe diffuse and left main disease, and angiogram look like those with diabetic people, and rapid progression, as I just showed you. Equally high risk among vegetarians and non-vegetarians. Strangely, high rates or higher rates among women despite low rates of smoking. This is worse in India than in the US. And we already covered the, okay. This is the plaque removed from the right coronary artery of a vegetarian professor with a picture-perfect lifestyle and duration of the stay in the United States only 7 days. This day, the knowledge on the subject changed from heart disease among Indian diaspora to Indians in India. This is the angiogram showing left main disease, LAD 99%, and you saw the right coronary artery completely filling. He had emergency quadruple bypass surgery and lived another 10 years. Now, when I was talking about the malignant heart disease in young Indians, we did not have any data from India or Indian data for that matter. This is from the Institute of Health Metrics, and every one of you who are listening should pay attention to these slides and the slides that follow. This is death rate between the ages of 15 and 49. These are ages when we don't expect heart disease, let alone die from heart disease. India, right? High and going up. China, low and going down. And now number of deaths under the age of 50, India 185,000, China 88,000, USA 15. So the number of deaths among Indians under the age of 50 from heart disease is 12 times higher than the US. This is even more startling. 29% of all deaths under the age of 50 is among Indian men. When it comes to Indian women, 1/3 of all deaths under the age of 50 in the world is Indians. For women, the standard is 4% compared to 31% for Indians. Okay, I did the CADI study on Indian doctors, the cardiologists, the teachers, the preachers who know what to do. And the Indians, this orange color, they had 4 times more heart disease than white Americans. No difference between vegetarians and non-vegetarians. The rates are similar to New Delhi and Chennai, with Kerala and Goa having higher rates. So we looked at the risk factors. There are many risk factors, modifiable risk factors, standard, cholesterol, blood pressure, tobacco use, diabetes. And then we have risk enhancing factors, high triglyceride, metabolic syndrome. And then of course, there are genetic and non-modifiable factors. One thing I will be coming to and focusing more, lipoprotein little a is a modifiable risk factor, and that is on the verge of becoming a modifiable risk factor. And we did this study and found that the smoking and obesity were 1/10 that of Americans. Other risk factors were similar or lower, with the exception of diabetes, which was 9% then, and now 18%. So the $65,000 question is, why do Indians get such a high rate of heart disease? This is from the New York Times article on February 2012. In the UK, it's a big topic because the National Health Service is going broke, taking care of Indians with heart disease at a young age. There is what is called the US Biobank study. 500,000 people, Indians and South Asians, heart attack and other coronary events were doubled. But this is the most important slide or important fact. When the risk is predicted by pooled cohort equation used in the US or Q-risk-3 used in UK, the risks were identical, which means the risk prediction tools we use to predict the risk and treat does not predict the risk among Indians or underestimate it by 50%, 100%. Now, this study further confirmed levels of lipoprotein little a genetic risk factor, is 90 nanomoles. Indians have 60% higher levels of LPA little a. This lipoprotein is 99% genetic, and it is double that of Chinese. Now, many of you may not have heard, or even the cardiologists may not be familiar with this, and I have only limited time. So read these articles. Lipoprotein little a, an unrecognized genetic risk factor for malignant heart disease in young Indians. This one, lipoprotein little a in all populations and heart attack. And this is lipoprotein little a, how it differs from other populations. This is an important slide. This is the famous inter-heart study. And in that, lipids explained 47% of the heart disease, smoking 88%, diabetes 12%. Lipoprotein little a explained 10% of the heart attack. Almost identical to diabetes. But in this study, only 9% of the people had high LP-little, but other studies have shown that lipoprotein little affects 71 million people, 321 million people, compared to 71 million having diabetes. Even if you take 77 million, still diabetes is, or LP-little is 4 times more dangerous and 4 times more common and as dangerous as diabetes. So diabetes is important, lipoprotein little is more important. Now, is it all lipoprotein little? How about the established risk factors like tobacco, high cholesterol? About 20 to 30% of heart disease, particularly almost all heart disease under the age 50 is highly correlated with LP-little. At other ages, established risk factors, smoking, cholesterol, blood pressure, triglyceride, metabolic syndrome. Then we have unhealthy body weight and waistline, unhealthy diet loaded with saturated fat and trans fat. In India, air pollution has overtaken smoking. Then 2 dreaded things. These are poor awareness, treatment, and control of risk factors, especially in India, and even worse, low quality of cardiovascular care before, during, and after a heart attack. So the American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association jointly recommended South Asian ethnicity and LP-little as ASCVD risk-enhancing factors. Those with these risk-enhancing factors qualify for statin therapy if their LDL is more than 70. So this is no longer Dr. Ines crying in the wilderness for the last 30 years. This is American College of Cardiology, American Heart Association saying that, yes, we have a major league problem. And what are the other risk-enhancing factors? One is triglyceride, it's coming up, and also, of course, LP-little. This is an important slide. Coronary artery calcium burden and incident cardiovascular death. If you have calcium score, it's a $100 test. You do it, if your calcium score is more than 1,000, your chance of dropping dead is increased 5-fold. Nothing else, no other question, or no other risk factors needed. Number 2, there is another test. One is calcium score. If you're 1,000, you are danger. This study explains, this slide explains most of the heart attack and death among Indians. If your calcium score more than 100 and LP-little more than 50, your chance of having a heart attack or death is increased 5-fold. In my view, lipoprotein can be and should be measured as young as age 5, and lipoprotein little and calcium score as young as 30, both men and women. So these 2 numbers, which are not, both are risk markers. Now, having explained, we know why. Genetics loads the gun, environment to pull the trigger, and our treatment is, particularly India, is extremely suboptimal. The current management of LP-little is statin therapy, unless the LDL is already below 70, or bring it below 70. And you need most Indians who do not want to have a heart attack and do not want to be one of the statistics I showed you under the age 50 should consider taking medications. How about HDL? I told you about LP-little, you have to start worrying. I have good news for you. Stop worrying about HDL, IHDL, and low HDL have similarly high risk. It's no longer considered a risk factor of importance or risk factor of treatment, and you can stop worrying about it because 90% Indians have low HDL. Now, heart disease over the last 50 years, this is from 1969 to 2019, has become one of the most predictable, the preventable, and treatable of all chronic diseases. This is the UK data. Heart attack death rate has come down by 85%. Finland brought it down by 84%, US by 70%, and most countries have brought it down by 25 to 50%. So what do? We heard proactive measures from Apollo hospitals and everything. But there is a life symbol 7 is what the American Heart Association recommends. You implement. This looks very, very simple, but it's not as simple as you think. And what are they? Stop smoking, no question. Eat better, no question. Lose weight, control cholesterol, get active, control sugar, and manage blood pressure. Now let me get into a little bit of nitty-gritty of these 7 things. The United States, the American Heart Association has come up with what is called ideal cardiovascular health for Americans. And this applies to Indians, but Indians need specific modifications, which I have made. And this is that modifications. If you do these 7 things, it's recommended that these 7 things among Americans reduce the risk of a heart attack, stroke, and cancer by 80 to 90%. We don't have the data. I predict that if we do these 7 things for Indians, we can also reduce the risk by 70 to 90%. What are they? Not smoking, that includes BD2. Indians need double the exercise, 20 to 30 minutes. We have more abdominal obesity and insulin resistant. Healthy diet, no change. Our body mass index should be lower at 23, BMI 23. And ideally, Indians, waist circumference for men, 90 centimeters for men or 35 inches, and women, 80 centimeters or 31. If we look at this as the gut point, 80 to 90% Indians have these values, but it's not paid attention to. Then you don't need the doctor to get these things, you can do it. But there are next 3 things, you need the help of a doctor. If these 4 things should help get the numbers down. Ideal blood pressure, 120/80, no longer 140. Ideal blood sugar, you already heard the lecture before, 100. Then there are 2 numbers you have to remember. The ideal cholesterol, not 200, it should be less than 140. And you don't even have to measure the LDL. And if you're measuring the LDL, it should be less than 70. Okay. Then evidence, diet works. Banning the trans fat, cutting the saturated fat, lower the LDL from 120 to 100 to 105. Among Americans who consume an average of 14 ounces of meat a day, whereas Indians consume half an ounce of meat a day. There is now evidence that the benefit of lowering the LDL from 90, many people consider acceptable, to 30 with PCSK9 inhibitor injection. And I'm not recommending that, but to show you that by lowering the LDL to that level, reduce the risk of a heart attack by 25% in 3 years. And if you extend the treatment, or if you maintain LDL low, 40 milligram lower LDL from birth due to genetic favorable mutations, if you lower LDL by, if you have 40 milligram lower LDL, the risk is reduced by 54%. Again, we have written a paper for statin use. I think this should be followed by all Indians, wherever they are, because there are so many guidelines. Indian cardiologists see 300 patients a day, and they have no time to apply the formulas. So we have made it simple, order of priority. Sorry for my voice. I'm just recovering from COVID, or 6 days after the diagnosis, so my sound is a little raspy. Highly recommended for people with heart disease. But new recommendation, if you have blood pressure, diabetes, or tobacco use, you need statin therapy regardless of the age. Forget about the formula. That editorial explains that. And if you check the cholesterol 170, you don't need anything else to start. The second order of priority. Then if your lipoprotein little a, remember 1 in 4 Indians have high LP little a, and 100% of Indians have the ethnicity, South Asian ethnicity, and or triglyceride. It is reasonable to use statin therapy. And based on, yes.
Yeah, we have running short of time, so we can.
Yeah, just finishing it. Okay, now the statins, you can lower LDL by 50 to 60% with the high intensity and 35 to 49% with moderate intensity statin therapy. Weights, a 5 feet woman, recommended weight is 118, and 6 feet man is 169. Blood pressure, I already told you. So coming back to, we should pay attention that Indian women account for 31% of all death in the world under the age of 50, and Indian men 29%. Indians should be treated differently and early. So what have we learned today? There is no mystery about the heightened risk of heart disease, including extremely high death rate under the age of 50. Indians have a genetic predisposition mediated by LP(a), and LP(a) is found in 25 to 44% of the population, compared with the 7 to 8% for the diabetes. This LP(a) start blocking the artery from age 5 onwards and explain heart attack after age 18. And risk is furthermore synergistically increased by all our usual risk factors. And life symbol 7 for Indians should be implemented not after a heart attack or 4 bypass, starting from primary school onwards. That's the time you start. You start treatment after the age 50 or 60 after the bypass. It's like putting the fertilizer on the week before the harvest. Life symbol 7 for Indians should be implemented as early as possible. And most Indians, they hate medications, but they would require statin therapy to maintain it below 70. And about 600 slides and 200 pages of information is available. Some of them are old, some of them I already showed you, and I'll be happy to address all your questions. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Enos. Thank you very much. It was timely, very, very important topic. and it doesn't jolt Indian community, I don't know what else will. So moving on, we have the next speaker. Thank you. If you hang around, we'll have some questions at the end. So next speak, power of positive human connections enhances happiness, and happiness enhances longevity. And Daniel Amos, in his recent book, You Happier, he said that 30% of that happiness and all that is genetic, but 70% is modifiable. So you should do everything to modify and to make it clear to us, to help us understand and practice. Our next speaker is Dr. Ravi Kohli, is President-elect of API, and he will be introduced by his predecessor and current President of API, American Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. API is American Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. Dr. Anupama Gotimakala will introduce Dr. Ravi Kohli. Anupama, please.
Thank you, Dr. Adisesha Reddy Garu, and thank you, NATA, for organizing this wonderful session. We are all focused on prevention, so that's what API is working this year as well. Focus more on prevention than disease cure. So without wasting much time, I just want to give a brief about API upcoming convention, which is happening in San Antonio, Texas, and it's from June 23rd to 26th. And I'm so proud that Dr. Prem Reddy Garu, founding member of NATA, is our gold sponsor. Thank you so much, Prem Reddy Garu. We miss you today. And there are a lot of activities, but the main theme of this convention is on Heal the Healers. So we are the healers because of the COVID. So we focused more on wellness packages and reflexology, yoga sessions, and lifestyle medicine talks, CME talks, and physician burnout talks. We have leadership coming from all the way from AMA president to Texas leadership. So without wasting much time, let me introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Ravi Kohli. He's our incoming president-elect. He will be taking the gavel in less than 5 weeks. So Ravi is a board-certified psychiatrist with additional qualifications in addiction, forensic, and geriatric psychiatry. He's a psychiatric medical director at SPHS, director of outpatient mental health and drug and alcohol treatment program in Western Pennsylvania. He's very extremely seasoned in leadership. So he has been in the ATMG USA as past president and Ramkana Rangaraya Medical College and Tri-State Association of Physicians of Indian Origin, TAPI, Pittsburgh. And welcome, Ravi, and we are looking forward for your talk. Beautiful.
Thank you, Anupama.
Talk of the hour now.
Okay, thank you, Anupama, for that introduction, and also thank you, Adisesha Reddy Anna, and NATA, API, and APNA for giving me this opportunity. I don't want to waste too much time. Let me get to the topic, and I'm going to talk about human connections and positive emotions. As you all know, mental health is defined not as the absence of illness, but also well-being reflected by dealing with life stressors, working productively, and also contributing to the community. That's important. What is the incidence of mental health problems? About 50% are diagnosed at one time in their life, and about 20% at any given year. And also 1 in 5 children have mental health problems, and 1 in 4 have severe mental health problems. George Vaillant, a famous psychiatrist from Harvard, defined different dimensions of mental health: above normal health, mental status, positive psychology, individual maturity, emotional social intelligence, subjective well-being, and also resilience. I'll kind of cover all those aspects a little bit here and there. And I want to talk a little bit about mental health challenges in Indian diaspora. We have a stigma in our community about facing mental health issues, and we kind of avoid seeking treatment. And there are many factors for that. And as a matter of fact, South Asian immigrants have a higher risk of mental health problems because of many issues, including communication, acculturation, immigration, discrimination, as well as microaggression they face every day. 2018 study showed that stress-related acculturation and all these factors affect the mental health of immigrants, especially the South Asian. So getting help is not easy for us, especially as opposed to the white middle class people who can seek help very easily. And why is that? Parents expect highly of their children, given their own success and their own sacrifices, they believe children should succeed beyond their own success they have achieved. So that puts extra pressure on the children. In fact, the prevalence of psychological distress among children of immigrants is double the first generation immigrant population. And children of Asian Americans, Pacific Islander, Latinx have even more anxiety and depression compared to European immigrants. Then there are cultural issues like privacy, proud self-reliance, preference for non-Western medicine, uneasiness with American healthcare system also deter us from taking care of ourselves. So we need to break all these barriers. Immigrant children also face financial, logistical, cultural, language challenges too. So, but also we have to ask some questions among ourselves. Is it also because we misunderstand health, mental health as an important part of our well-being? Because family views mental illness as a weakness or a strain on their family reputation and dignity? Is it because if we seek help outside, does it mean that there is some shame involved? Is it because that we support our children beyond their early adult life into their late life, giving advice, giving financial support? So we kind of avoid seeking help outside sometimes. Is that all these factors play a role in us for avoiding treatment and seeking help outside? And also we might feel inadequate if our children seek help outside of the family situation. So these factors may be playing a role in kind of putting a barrier for seeking help. And also Indian perspective, Dr. Chaturvedi, NIMHANS director, mentioned that it's easy for people to talk about physical symptoms and illness than to express their emotions of feeling depressed. These are some of the vernacular vocabulary. Sometimes they may not capture the clinical aspect of the mental health. Sometimes lack of right vocabulary also prevents us from seeking help in a mental health setting. So we kind of somatize and complain about physical illness like fatigue or the sleeplessness or stomach aches or headaches, rather than seeking mental health treatment. So the call for action is that we all have, as a communities, as individuals, as media, as professionals, policymakers, institutions, have to rise to the challenge in addressing the stigma and barriers for mental health. And now coming to post-COVID and COVID, stress is everywhere, especially during this COVID pandemic. Stress is overwhelming our capacity to function and cope. So stress can trigger sympathetic nervous system activation of a fight and flight reaction. So what are the outcomes of stress and the trauma? Let me go back. So stress can cause some restoration of balance after some time, or succumbing to the stress, or post-traumatic growth, post-trauma growth. Sometimes we can become stronger and better after a stressful event. And these are characterized by greater appreciation of life, closer relationship with our family and friends, and the community, identification of new possibilities that we didn't realize we have, and also realizing our own internal strengths and positive spiritual changes. These 5 dimensions are seen in people with post-trauma growth. How can we achieve that? Let's look at it. And origins of fear. Why we fear the unknown, why fear? But fear has a survival protection mechanism. Fears makes us be aware of the threats in our environment and protect ourselves. But this fear is good for our ancestors who lived in the caves with the precarious life situations, frightening and threatening life experiences. But this same fear is not necessary for us to be so hypervigilant, constantly being threatened by kind of imaginary threats than more real threats. But our genetics are predetermined because our ancestors survived because of the threat to signal they have, and we inherited that by natural selection. So we all have same mechanism, but that mechanism is not needed as much as our ancestors did. But what was a feature it became a bug for us now. So we need to avoid reacting constantly, fearfully to every imaginary threat rather than real threat. So what are the fallacies that we do in our thinking about why fear is perpetuated? Generalization. We kind of attribute one feature of an individual specimen to the entire group of that represents that. So generalization is a fallacy that we fall into to perpetuate fear. Another fear mechanism is perpetuated by kind of confirmation bias. We like to hear what we already know and what we believe rather than face inconvenient truths. So that kind of takes less cognitive demand on us to kind of learn new things and challenge our own biases. So we succumb to fear that reinforce our own fears and biases. And finally, another important mechanism is confirmation, cause and effect bias, conflating. So when two things occur, they don't necessarily mean cause and effect. They could be correlation. For example, hot sun can cause ice cream to melt, hot sun can cause sunburn. But these are correlated, but they're not causation, ice cream melting and having sunburn. Whereas hot sun has a causation effect, these two don't have the same causation effect, they're a correlation. As the slide illustrates a joke here, that kind of illustrates the point. A guy was tearing up pieces of paper and throwing it out of the window of a city bus. And when he was asked why he was doing that, he said to keep the elephants out of the city street. And then the next guy said, there are no elephants in the city. He said, see, that what I'm doing is working. That's why there are no elephant. But so he's conflating the cause and effect versus correlation there. So we do that even as medical scientists and researchers. Sometimes we conflate cause and effect versus correlation. And coming to social isolation, the deadliness of social isolation has been recognized. 2019, it declared as a worldwide concern. About 50% people are living alone. As a matter of fact, UK just appointed a Ministry of Loneliness in 2019, and Japan followed recently in 2011. So why? Because 43% are living lonely. They have a 45% increase of mortality. It's equal to smoking 15 cigarette pack a day. The risk factor include as severe as obesity and smoking, as severe as cholesterol and all those things. So what is the neuroendocrine phenomenon behind it? Social isolation has been recognized as a major risk factor for morbidity and mortality in humans for more than a quarter century. Population-based longitudinal studies have shown that social isolation is a risk factor independent of other health behaviors. So human and animal investigation also neuroendocrine stress mechanism that may be involved suggests chronic isolation activates hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical axis. What about why? Let me illustrate it. From babies to elderly, we're all psychosocially embedded. And when that is severed, the ties are severed, we have a kind of a high illness burden, and we don't recover well from our health challenges. Quantitative analysis showed, studies showed, among 400,000 married couples, when a spouse dies, there's an increased rate of mortality by 18% in men and 16% in women. Loneliness affects immune system. Research found that freshman students who reported feeling lonely have a reduced immune system response when they were given flu vaccine. They catch colds easily and they don't recover well. People who are more socially integrated have better biomarkers for physiological functioning, such as low blood pressure, body mass index, lower cholesterol, C-reactive proteins, etc. So loneliness is affecting your immune system, affecting your heart, or diabetes, and all these factors. Why is it so? Because remember, we as a social species, human beings are social species. We're born prematurely because we have the bipedal as we evolved. Instead of a four-legged animal, we came for a two-legged animal. So the baby has to be delivered earlier than its maturation. So a lot of maturation takes place outside of the womb. Up to 2 years, they're maturing. So these 2 years are very important for protection and their survival. So it requires more than a mother and a father to take care of the child. A community is needed to protect the child, that infant child, for it to survive. So it's a social bond, so important for our survival. And that is embedded in our genetics. And what about social contagion? Data from Framingham study showed that becoming happy, depressed, or obese are strongly mirrored by similar changes in your close friends. It's kind of amazing to imagine that if your friend is happy, you're happy. If they're obese, you can be obese too. An investigator found a geographical contagion as well. If your friend lives within a mile, you have 25% more likely to be happy. If a neighbor is happy, you have 34% more likely to be happy. This is illustrated by this slide, which I'll skip. So Harvard grant study, I'll skip it a little bit. George Vaillant again said, who was the team leader for the study, which is a 50-year study. When the study began, nobody cared about empathy, attachment. But as we studied the more and longer, the relationships are important for our survival and well-being. And aging, in his book, he talked about the stable marriage is so important. The relationships are so important for her physical as well as emotional health. As important as alcohol, tobacco, cessation, and all that. Robert Waldinger, who followed his same study as the third director, also did the same statement. Taking care of your body is important, but tending to your relationship is even more important, of a form of self-care. That's a revelation for him. He's a Zen master, but he realized the importance of relationships, friendship, loneliness skills, which is powerful as smoking and alcoholism. So we need to avoid loneliness. We need to improve our communications in our relationship. So be intentional in spending time together with spouse or your partner, because we hardly spend enough time with family. 20 minutes we talk to each other in a week. We need to spend at least 20 to 30 minutes catching up with each other. And use more I statement than you statements, so they don't become defensive. You express your feelings rather than attributing anything to them. I'm kind of skipping fast to catch up as much. And tips for improving quality in communication: express negative feelings constructively. If you're constantly giving criticism, nobody's going to listen to you. So don't always show resentment, disappointment, and disapproval, because you have to give at least 4 or 5 compliments before you do one criticism for the other person to accept your feedback openly. So be specific. Don't be kind of vague and generalize again. Be specific about what you're disappointed or upset about. And don't do mind reading. Actually, I do the mind reading opposite. I expect my wife to know what exactly is on my mind all the time and take care of that. So, but we should avoid mind reading as well. So listen without being defensive in your relationship, and express your positive feeling. Like I said, appreciation, affection, respect, admiration, approval, and warmth should be expressed generously to our spouses, because they do so much for us. And then they're more likely to hear a negative comment or negative feedback, and more likely to correct the thing that they need to correct. So emotional intelligence is another factor that we all need to develop. That is the ability to recognize our own emotions and manage our emotions, as well as emotions in other people, how they're reacting, how they're thinking, and how to read them, and how to negotiate a mutually beneficial interaction. So again, Dr. David Goleman wrote a book on emotional intelligence. Many people talked about it before him, but he kind of popularized it in his bestseller. Accurate conscious perception of your own emotions. You name it to tame it. You have to name your emotions for you to be able to tame it. And then modifying your emotions. And again, recognizing the emotions in other people and negotiating the relationship with them to kind of reach the common goals. Why is it important? People with high emotional intelligence accept themselves and others better compared to people with low emotional intelligence. They communicate assertively as opposed to passively and aggressively. They display empathy versus lacking empathy. And is it important for you to succeed in life? Yes. More than IQ and technical skills, which we all have pretty much an equal share. Some of us have more emotional intelligence. They tend to succeed better. 85% of your success as a leader is determined by emotional intelligence. And in any job, 66% of your success is determined by your emotional intelligence. Sometimes you look at the C-suite executive, they're more emotionally intelligent if they're to be succeeding as a leader of a team. Gratitude, practicing gratitude is so important. And studies have shown that people who practice gratitude have better cognitive health as well as physical health as well. And why is it so? It's a gratitude increases life satisfaction, happiness, optimism, as well as empathy, and fewer symptoms of anxiety and depression. In a cognitive framework, you have a positive attention bias, positive interpretation bias, positive memory bias, leading to positive neural changes and psychological and physiological changes, leading to sense of well-being. In a psychosocial framework, the same thing. When you receive an act of generosity, you have a increased pro-social behavior. You do the similar act of kindness or generosity to somebody else, and increases social capital and social bond and sense of connection and well-being. So again, religion has a different meaning for different people. The word religion has different etymology. One of the etymology is binding together. And it's interesting, religion has the same etymology as well as yoga. Yoga is union, yoke, coming together. And so these are all similar in concept. Coming together either with each other or with God is what religion is. Religion is a set of practices, beliefs, worships, and sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. But beyond religion, spirituality is very important because it develops gratitude, altruism, well-being, and forgiveness. And roots of generosity, again, it's so important. Many of you are very generous people contributing to the community. Dr. Prem Reddy Garu is a prime example and a role model for all of us to be generous. And he's such a great example for that. And we are generous species. That's a kind of a startling statement because we're all made to believe that we are a selfish creature, selfish animals, and aggression is important for our survival. But as a matter of fact, there's a nuanced experience and explanation why generosity is so important for our species survival. And it runs deep in us. And according to this theory, biology of evolution, we, like I said, remember how social bonding is so important. Generosity is also so important for social bonding. Species as diverse as bees, birds, vampire bats, rats, chimpanzees exhibit a forms of generosity called pro-social behavior, and that acts to benefit them as well as others. So our survival depended on each other being generous to each other in our ancestral time. The occurrence of generosity across species suggests generosity may be an evolutionarily adopted behavior. So what are the benefits of generosity? Most of studies have uncovered evidence humans are biologically wired for generosity. Acting generously activates same reward pathway that activated by sex and food. Correlation may explain why giving may help feel good. So doing well, by doing good, we do well. That's what I think Thomas Jefferson said, and so we can do well by doing good. And further evidence also suggests deep roots of human generosity comes from many studies, as well as especially in children. They're so sharing and caring and generous. That kind of goes away as they grow and becomes more kind of competitive with each other. And again, many
more
studies
minutes,
have,
sorry to interrupt.
No, I'll skip quickly. Basically, I'm kind of stressing on generosity because so many of you are so generous. I want to applaud you and kind of validate your giving as the important part of your well-being as well. And well, small acts of kindness doesn't have to be millions of dollars. Just helping each other, holding the door for each other can be important as an act of generosity. Optimism versus pessimism is again an important part of emotional wellness. What is optimism? Optimism is characterized by people who think problems are not permanent. People think problems are not pervasive. It's not personal failure. Problems are changeable, circumscribed, circumstantial thinking. So you don't own the failure. You kind of attribute the failure to many things and try to correct that mistake or a failure, and you're more likely to succeed in the future. So again, physical activity is so important for our mental health as well. We talked about it earlier. And by psychologically, it gives a sense of self-efficacy, distraction, and immunologically, it improves your immune system. And physiologically, it does a lot of good things as well. And another important thing is spending time in the nature is so important. And there are some books and studies have shown, it's called Shinrinkin Yoku or forest therapy done in Japan. It showed that spending time in the nature, for example, even in your own yard, doesn't have to be like a hiking or a forest or trip or anything. You can just go outside and spend time in the nature. That helps with your mental health. And there's actually some physiological mechanisms behind it as well. I won't go into that too much. And wisdom and knowledge, the final slide or final point I want to make is, we live in a society driven by data, information, and knowledge, which is good. But beyond that, we need to develop wisdom. Data is just like a fossil fuel, while information is like a crude oil, and the knowledge is a petroleum product. But finally, what we do with that knowledge is important. Not just knowing what to do, how to do it, but why we're doing it. And when we move from a knowledge-based society, from a consumer-based society to wisdom-based society and contribution-based society, we're much more likely to be survive as a society. Western society thought human knowledge will solve all the problems, but they did not. Actually, they made it worse. So it's important that we not succumb to the media exposure, constantly giving sound bites, but think more deeply and more kind of widely about the various experiences we go through and develop wisdom. Our ancestors lived with wisdom. They lived in forests, they lived in the nature, they did the meditation, they did the positive, like mindfulness, all those things. That's how they kind of became so wise, and so many scriptures were written by them that we're still reading and benefiting from them. I think we'll go back to that old wisdom-based society. Again, a simple tip.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ravi.
I'll skip here and I'm done. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity again.
Thank you very much, Ravi. Excellent, timely topic. And we should practice, even if you practice 25% of what you said, we'll be better people and live happier.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And, you know, we are running behind, but then Swarna Garu, you know, she had a tornado warning, and then her power failure and all that. So now she's going to join by phone and give her our nutrition. She is going to talk on nutritional management. She's a PhD in nutrition and works at University of Kansas in Kansas City. Yeah, so Swarna Garu, just to thank you for agreeing to make it brief. So 5-minute presentation. You can go ahead, please. Nutrition and health.
You're on mute, Andy, Swarna Garu. Swarna Garu, you're on mute, Andy. Swarna Garu, unmute. Please unmute yourself. Not sure if there is any weather issues there again. Okay, so let's continue, Andy.
Yeah, let's continue. Okay, so let's
Probably she has internet problem due to tornado warning.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, that's what it is, Andy. That's what.
Yeah. Okay. Then so let's go ahead and I don't know. I got a text. Swarna Garu joined, but I don't know whether that's accurate or not. But
no, yeah, we can see her on the. We can see her here, but some audio and video issues are there because of bad weather.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and move forward. I think we have a limited time. We ran behind, so. Can we limit one question for each speaker? Can we limit to one question for each speaker? So anybody want to go? I'll go ahead and start off in the interest of time. So I'm going to go to cardiologist, Dr. Enos and Dr. Bhavanand. The aspirin, this is all evolving, aspirin, is that for cardio prevention? What's your take on cardio prevention using aspirin? And what is the latest in 2022 for aspirin, use of aspirin?
Aspirin was recommended some 40 years ago, before we had effective medication to control blood pressure, cholesterol, or diabetes. Since then, studies after studies after studies showed that the risk of bleeding outweighs the benefits, and the latest guidelines from the United States Preventive Services has all but limited the use of aspirin in people without heart attack to those 40 to 59 years of age with sufficiently high risk of a heart attack and sufficiently low risk of bleeding, which means aspirin is in the bottom of the armamentarium and should be avoided. And the new aspirin is called statin, is the new aspirin.
Okay, thank you. What about Bhavanand? What's your comment on that?
Yeah, so I think Dr. Enos, you well said. I just want to add a little bit because all the studies that were done so far are in the Europe and the USA. I think the representation of Southeast Asians in these studies are pretty much low. If you take an average like a 40-year-old Indian, until proven otherwise, they have dyslipidemia. And then if they have an additional risk factor like a diabetes, hypertension, or a smoking history, or a family history of coronary artery disease, I think their 10-year risk for having a heart attack is more than 10%. I think as for the guidelines, what they have said is, it is beneficial for the people, those who have 10-year risk of heart attack is more than 10% to use aspirin unless they have severe risk of bleeding, which I believe most of the Indians, those who are more than 40 years of the age, has any of the problems like either like a family history of premature coronary artery disease or hypertension, diabetes, or smoking history, should start taking low dose aspirin. I think this is the gist of summary. I went through all these guidelines like ACC, AHA, European Society of Cardiology, and then US Preventive Services Task Force guidelines. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
This Dr. Asser, this is a question for Dr. Enos. Dr. Enos, the continuation of the aspirin, the calcium score, the real absolute indications and the use of aspirin basing on the calcium score? And second thing is, second question is about apoprotein A. Do you screen routinely along with LDL cholesterol?
It's a good question. Thank you for asking the question. Practically all the guideline makers have made recommendations of testing lipoprotein little a in one way or other. But the one I agreed the most, that is the 2021 Canadian guidelines. And they said that practically all guideline makers agree lipoprotein should be measured once in a lifetime and you don't have to repeat it. Number two, when to do that? Canadian guidelines recommended and made it simple. You measure the lipoprotein little a along with the first time you measure the lipid profile. And that help you identify, and there are two risks, short-term risk and long-term risk. Nothing predicts a long-term risk of a heart attack than lipoprotein little a, which start plugging in the arteries by age 5, whereas smoking consequences, blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, all those things, except for the genetic, starts at 30. So I think you should measure it preferably the first time you do it and should not repeat the LPA little a. Provided it's done the right method, it should be measured by a method not affected by LPA isoforms and reported in nanomoles per liter, and you identify your the high lifetime risk. That's one. Now, you also mentioned about the calcium score.
And the
I think when
No,
we
no.
do it offline.
The calcium score, women had no problem for getting mammogram done when turned 40 or 45 or 50, recommendation change. Calcium score tells you what has already happened to you with respect to your coronary arteries. If the calcium score is high, and of course there is up to 100 was normal before, now 100 means threefold risk, and if you're high LPA little a, you are in the highest risk category of 20%. So we have to get out of the aspirin more and start using statin, which is 100 times safer.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Enos. So I think, before we complete the questions, brief vote of thanks. Dr. Sanjeev Reddy is going to say brief vote of thanks, and then we will have time for a few more questions. Sanjeev, please briefly.
Yeah, on behalf of NATA and APNA Foundation, thank you all for arranging this excellent seminar. Dr. Adisesha Reddy and the team, Ram Reddy, Subbareddy, and Narayan Reddy. It was an excellent job. We had great speakers who actually spoke very well. I would like to thank Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, Dr. Sriram, Dr. Jagannath, Dr. Prasad, Dr. Padmaja, Dr. Swarna, Dr. Enos, Dr. Ravi. All did an excellent job doing this webinar. Really appreciate on behalf of NATA. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, any questions for? Thank you, Sanjeev.
Thank you. No.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for other speakers? Let's say Dr. Prasad Garimala. One question for each speaker.
I have a question for Dr. Ravi Kulli. I know that emotional intelligence is absolutely important for success. Is there any ways and means to improve that?
Yeah, definitely. Like Adisesha said, a lot of these are learned abilities. Some people are naturally born with that, but not necessarily you cannot not learn it. Like Adisesha said, 70% of these optimism, emotional intelligence are learnable skills. And one thing is first to be aware of the importance of emotional intelligence, because there are so many people are so cold sometimes. They don't understand other people's emotion. They don't listen. Active listening is so important. Empathy is so important. These are all skills that we pay attention to, and we internalize those patience, empathy, compassion, self-care, and self-compassion as well. You don't have to be perfect. you can just keep on practicing until you get better. Acceptance, mindfulness, they all go together with emotional intelligence. Thank you, Bhavana.
Okay. Any other questions? Maybe the sleep, I have one question if nobody has any on sleep. So this, I read this book by Matthew Walker. So he says that even older, the sleep amount is the same, but our understanding is that when you get older, you need less sleep. But according to Matthew Walker, he says that sleep is the same, whether no matter how old you are. Is that correct, Prasad?
Yes, sir. I think it is true. In general, as we age, 10-year-old will need 10 hours of sleep. But it is a myth that, as we age, we need further less than 7 hours of sleep. There is one exception, is that about 3% of the population, they are short sleepers. They need only 4 to 5 hours of sleep. And that is basically because of the mutation that occurs in the brain, and they need only 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and they can still be productive, happy, healthy. And it may not apply to everybody, but the rest of the 97% unfortunate people need that 7 hours of sleep.
Is Donald Trump one of them?
I'm not sure whether it's the genetics or the drugs.
I see.
Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, he sleeps. He says that he sleeps only 4 hours or something.
Right.
Yeah, and then any other questions for any other speakers? If nobody has any questions, I have one for Padmaja. Anybody else has questions? My batteries also, my laptop is coming to an end here. Okay, Padmaja, quick question is, in his recent book, Lifespan, David Sinclair, he's the author. The title of the book is Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. He recommends that everybody take metformin, and he actually takes 1 gram of metformin himself. He's not a diabetic. He doesn't have elevated hemoglobin A1C, but he still takes it because it prolongs the life expectancy, and he thinks it is beneficial to human race, to all of us. Do you recommend us to take metformin, like maybe low dose, 500 milligrams, even if you don't have diabetes? Especially if it's borderline.
As an internist, I do value metformin quite a bit. It is a lifesaver in a lot of patients. The way it acts at this time is by helping with insulin resistance. As I mentioned earlier, insulin resistance is the #1 problem that leads to the other complications of diabetes. That is heart disease or stroke or peripheral vascular disease, or if they are having any amputations or any kidney disease. It's all causes the problem. So whether taking the metformin long-term, they did do some study and found out it prevents the colon cancers as well as aging problems. And I forgot the details, but at least 5-6 aspects of healthcare gets improved by metformin. But it is a medicine that needs to be cautiously taken because it can cause lactic acidosis. If lactic acidosis higher levels can shut down the kidneys and they may die or end up on dialysis. So without getting screened with their lactic acid levels, whether their body is able to handle it or not, I would recommend to get screened by their physician, having a talk with them, have that contract or a rapport with the physician so they check their BMP blood test and can start them. And in the past, it was not approved for pre-diabetes or borderline diabetes. Now it is approved. It is approved for polycystic ovary disease to improve the infertility and certain conditions that are approved. Some of them are off-label uses. But what I would recommend is do talk to your physician because it needs to be talked, discussed, and gather their consent to know the risks involved and the advantages that they can receive. I would recommend before metformin, diet and exercise. I think you might have heard from all the speakers today. our diet, Indian diet, even though it is a plant-based mostly, it is not getting prepared well. It is causing a lot of issues, and our BMI needs to be low, our cholesterol levels need to be, means diet needs to be dealt first, and exercise to burn out the excess calories, then medicines. Because metformin effect is a short term. Our body doesn't work after 2-3 months of metformin. A lot of them, progress into real diabetes, even though they are on metformin.
Okay,
Those are the points that come to me right away.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Aditya Reddy garu, I think I just want to improvise, or maybe just to add to Dr. Padmaja garu's statement. I think David Sinclair is the PhD from Harvard, has done a fantastic research regarding slowing of the aging. So the way they described use of metformin is to decrease mTOR. Basically, this mTOR molecule is decreased with the exercise, use of metformin, as well as with intermittent fasting. I think there's a lot of science behind it. I think the basis for recommending metformin use is to decrease the mTOR, that way like reversing the aging process. So I think that's the basis for him. I think we need to have like a lot more like a randomized controlled trials to really see and document this particular thing. So I think they're talking about the epigenome working, kind of controlling mTOR regulation this way. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's good. Good.
What is intermittent fasting?
I mentioned
but anyway, our time does not permit right now. So
thanks, Andy. I just want to say
my my video is gone. So yeah, I think Dr. Ram Reddy garu will conclude this webinar. Go ahead, Ram Reddy.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Ashisha Reddy garu, and thanks all the wonderful speakers. It's definitely on behalf of NATA. We sincerely thank everybody for participating and giving your experience to our community. It's more valuable.
My video is gone.
And I just want to thank Subbareddy Meka for taking care of all the things behind the scene. So Zoom and all the technical work. Yeah, thank you, Narayan Reddy garu, and so all the team. And I sincerely thank Apna Foundation, Praveen Sampath garu and Bhavanand Reddy garu, and also API team for joining and giving your valuable suggestions. Thank you, Andy. Thank you to all the speakers, and especially for taking care of the live streaming and all. Lalesh from Mana TV and Sridhar Chillara garu from TV5 and Mana TV. Thank you all for your support, and we'll bring more and more updates in future also. Then thanks again, Ashisha Reddy garu, for bringing this wonderful webinar.
Thank you, Allah Ram Reddy and Subba Reddy and Narayan Reddy. Without non-doctors, we couldn't have done it. So anyway, I think we may have one or 2 minutes. I think since Mohan brought up, I think we are done with the meeting. Anybody can adjourn. But if anybody want to stay and want to hear about intermittent fasting, either Padmaja or Bhavanand, you want to comment briefly, and we can. Everybody
we'll end with the intermittent fasting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So,
Bhavanand, you are the one who
yes,
go for it.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I've been doing a lot of research on intermittent fasting. So typically, like intermittent fasting, we call it as not taking any calories for at least 16 hours a day. That's ideal. Some people start to even beyond 12 hours is also intermittent fasting, but most of the science says 16 hours of like not taking any calories. So the way you can put it is anything more than 20 calories you take, that interrupts your intermittent fasting. The idea is simply, if you're not consuming any calories for 16 hours, what happens is insulin secretion will go down significantly. That is the concept of intermittent fasting.
That's an autophagy, right? Autophagy.
Yeah, exactly. Like there are so many things will go on that decreases the mTOR level, that decreases the insulin secretion, upregulates, or especially like fat burning is going to be upregulated. And then autophagy is the one. Autophagy is the one usually like a starts like a getting into the picture like a once you go beyond 17 hours of fasting, but it is at its peak like a beyond 48 hours of like a intermittent fasting. So the idea is